Good. All right, thank you. It's 6 o'clock, so we're going to call our meeting to order, and I would invite everyone to join us for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I don't. Good evening. Happy New Year. Before we get started, I just wanted to take a minute to acknowledge that this is the Board of Education's first meeting since our community experienced a very terrible tragedy three weeks ago that resulted in the loss of Selectman Sean Manning. And I know that this board joins me in offering our very sincere condolences to Sean's family, his wife, his friends, and especially the folks on our volunteer fire department who served alongside Sean. It was truly a terrible tragedy. And that said, I think we'll get started with our agenda. Is there a motion to approve tonight's agenda?
So moved.
Thank you, Meg. Is there a second?
A second.
Seconded by Kim. Thank you. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Motion passes. Approval of consent agenda. The consent agenda this evening includes quite a few items. I'm just going to list them out quickly. It's the approval of our December 3rd, 2024 Board of Ed regular meeting minutes, the approval of our December 16th Board of Ed special meeting minutes, the approval of an out-of-state field trip for the Portland High School class of 2025 to Boston on May 19th, 2025, the approval of art-rich photography donation to Portland High School in the amount of $432.80, the approval of art-rich photography donation to Portland Middle School in the amount of $431.10, the approval of the Grin and Barrett Enterprises, Inc. donation to Gildersleeve School in the amount of $858.03, and the approval of the Shutterfly donation to Valley View School in the amount of $568.19. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Thank you, Meg. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Dave. Is there any discussion about any of those items?
Just because we're approving, I think, 4 different photography studios, or I guess 3 different, with 4 different checks, is there any interest or move towards moving to one provider for student photographs? Because I know as a parent, like, they offer different packages. It's not seamless across the companies. It seems as though some may order an increased percentage donation to us versus others. So I'm just kind of curious if that's ever been considered, since it's on the agenda this evening to approve this.
Let me put it on my leadership team agenda and get back to you.
Okay, thanks, Joyce.
I haven't put that much thought into it yet, but I will.
Yeah, sounds good. Any other questions, comments? Nope. All in favor? Aye. The motion passes unanimously. Audience of citizens. Do we have anyone with us this evening in person who wishes to address the board at this time? Do we have anyone online who wishes to address the board at this time?
We have a couple people like just joined.
Sure, we can give it a minute. Okay, it sounds like there's no comment at this time, and as a reminder, there is a second opportunity for public comment towards the end of our agenda. This evening, we do not have a Portland Public Schools Spotlight on the agenda, but we'll look forward to that maybe at the end of the month when we have hopefully a slightly shorter agenda. Yep. We're going to move on to our student representative report.
So the week leading up to winter break was filled with lots of excitement at PJS. Our Winter Spirit Week was culminated in a spirited pep rally where we acknowledged our winter athletes. The highlight of the event was the faculty versus unified basketball game, where students and staff alike had the opportunity to participate. Leading up to the pep rally, there were numerous spirit days that were held, such as Medieval Monday and Jersey versus Jersey Shore Day. As always, the week concluded with the Red and Black Spirit Day. Our last pep rally of the school year will be held in the spring, where we will acknowledge all the spring sports. The class of 2025 is currently holding 2 fundraisers. This week, from January 5th to the 11th, Adams is holding a roundup fundraiser. If you plan on going to Adams, or if your pantry is starting to run low, please consider rounding up to support my class. Additionally, we are having a Chipotle fundraiser tomorrow, January 8th, from 5 to 9 p.m. The fundraiser will be held at the Chipotle in Glastonbury within Somerset Square. Hopefully, we will see you there.
Well, sorry.
The National Technical Honor Society induction is going to be January 28th at 6 p.m. with 23 new inductees.
Well, returning after the break is not always easy. There is certainly no shortage of excitement happening here at PHS. One of the biggest events on the horizon is our school musical. Many Portland High School and Portland Middle School students are hard at work building sets and rehearsing scenes. It promises to be an incredible show. In addition to the musical, our winter sports teams are in full swing. Basketball and wrestling have several home games offering plenty of opportunities for fans to come out and show their support for those teams, along with the cheerleaders. For those who prefer indoor sports, our track team is also bringing plenty of excitement. Lastly, our math league will be competing at Xavier this Thursday. We wish them all the best of luck.
Nice. Thank you. Any questions for either of our student representatives?
Do you have a date for the musical yet?
21st and 22nd, I believe.
March. Yeah, that sounds right. All right, thank you both. And Caitlin, we know at some point you have to scoot out, and we totally understand whenever you need to leave. All right, we move on to communications and updates, and we will begin with Dr. Britton's report.
All right. So first, thanks for meeting at 6 tonight. When Tricia and I were looking at the agenda, we're like, oof, we could be there a while, particularly with a very important presentation tonight of our student performance data and our next generation accountability reports from last year. So I appreciate you getting together a little bit early. We'll try to move it along as quick as we can. I really did my best to move some things to our other board meeting of the month, but some of these things I just couldn't get off. So a couple of things, sort of a bittersweet night. I just wanted to start by recognizing, and I included Tim Lavoie's letter of resignation in your board packet tonight. So Tim was appointed. He's going to be on the Board of Selectmen, so he's not going far, which is going to be very nice to have him there, and congratulate him. And I am very, very, very appreciative and excited to let you know tonight that Stacy Benham, who was our board member, is going to be coming back and filling that seat. And I see Stacy here tonight. I reached out to Stacy and promised her my firstborn if she would do this for us. I'm not sure if she'll want him, but he's available if she takes me up on that. But Stacy, thank you. I know, orienting a new board member right in the middle of budget discussions and a lot of very important work that we're doing, trying to figure out how to work on the facilities would have been a challenge. It's always great to orient board members in November, not right in the thick of January. So thank you for stepping back in. I think we should have a cup of coffee, catch up. Let me fill you in on some of the things you've missed in the time you've been away, and we'll look to seat you at January 21st. We have to do that at a regular board meeting, correct? Is that the plan?
So our board bylaws just say that it has to happen at a meeting following our formal announcement of a resignation. So we're gonna look at the bylaws and see if it's feasible to seat you to have a vote on the appointment at our meeting next week.
14th.
Even though it's a special meeting,
Right.
I think if we properly notice it, it might be allowed. But we'll run that by Rebecca first, maybe.
Good plan. So good luck, Tim. He's not going to be far, and I know he will be very aware of and involved in what we're doing, and welcome back, Stacy. So I have some sad things to talk about tonight. We're some very important and inspirational and bright people are leaving us. I know you know that this will be Eric Martin's last presentation for you tonight. He's going to go out with wowing you with all of our data. I can't thank Eric enough for all of the work he's done with us. I'm looking forward to celebrating with him and the leadership team in a couple of weeks. But Eric's last day will be the not this Friday, the Friday after, right?
I think we said the
17th, right, I was gonna say 27th, it's the 17th. Eric, we wish you all the best of luck. Again, I look forward to celebrating with you in a couple of weeks. But his resignation letter is in this week's folder. Otherwise, we'll wish Eric well, and, he's on to great things in Farmington, very lucky to have him. I also included a couple of notices of retirement from Beth McCormick and Tricia Allen, two longtime outstanding master veteran teachers in our school district. Have reached that point in their career where they're looking to move on, and I know Tricia's working on her dream house, and I spoke with Beth the other day, and she has all kinds of awesome ideas about travel and grandchildren on the way, and all those things that you sort of look forward to when you get to that phase in life. We will definitely be celebrating Tricia and Beth this spring. They're here throughout the rest of the year, but their letters of resignation are in the folder. And as a reminder, folks had to notify us by December 1st of their intention to retire, which does factor into our budget preparations. So wish Beth and Tricia all the best of luck, and look forward to celebrating with them. So let me stop there and see if there are any questions.
I just have a quick, sorry to interrupt. Dylan, I think this mic in particular is like a little echoey. Is it possible that we could just turn the volume down a little bit?
that is.
Check.
It's giving me like a funny, are you hearing it also? Yeah.
Yeah, these are new.
Okay. Thank you. Sorry. Continue, Charles.
Okay. Any questions so far about people leaving the board, joining the board, leaving the district? Good. All right. Did include also in there an enrollment report for you, if you want to take a quick peek at that. Up a couple of students, pretty consistent though. Overall, I've been watching this enrollment report and considering it in the context of, Peter Prouder's enrollment projection. It's stable. We're at 1,226, and last year at this time we were at 1,214. So pretty consistent. And then of course,
Flip-flop that. We're at 1214.
you're correct. Thank you. So a little down, but otherwise fairly stable, consistent enrollment. And that enrollment report is also important because I'll be talking a little bit about it with you tonight in the context of our planning for next year. You're going to get your budget books shortly.
May I ask a question about that?
Of course.
Do we know why open choice enrollment dropped 5 students?
We do. That was a family who moved out of the district.
With 5 children?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. I know that family well and wish them well as I think it was New Britain they moved to.
Okay.
Okay. Any other questions? All right. Couple of quick notes before the big rollout of the budget books, and I just want to orient you to them. So last week, our strategic planning committee met Thursday. We were scheduled to meet every Thursday. We're having some challenges with whether we're going to be able to provide the staffing necessary to broadcast those, but right now it doesn't look like we're going to be able to do those over YouTube or Zoom. But we're here. Anybody's welcome to come. It's an open meeting. It'll be nice. Otherwise, minutes will be taken. But at this point, I can't commit to being able to broadcast it. I have had some conversations on the town side. It is a town committee. I'm not sure if they're going to be able to provide that or staff that. But at this point, we aren't able to because of our commitments to basketball and tech and other things. And our crew over here that you see working is also very busy this month. They've got 2 board meetings, 2 budget workshops, and an awful lot of commitments otherwise too. So all I would say to everybody is the meetings are open. People can come to the strategic planning committee, but at this point, I'm sorry, I can't commit that it's going to be on Zoom or YouTube. Otherwise, minutes will be recorded and people are welcome to come. There's audience of citizens and either watch those conversations or contribute their thoughts through the audience of citizens, but it's not just unlikely to happen over Zoom or YouTube. I just need to let people know that up front. And it's not because we're trying to hide anything, whatever anybody says on Facebook. It's just a staffing issue. Any questions about that? Okay.
Will meeting minutes be published?
Yes.
And where can people find them? If at the very least, we could tell them where to find the minutes so that we're not relying on Facebook posts to tell us what the meeting minutes were, because personally I saw some Facebook minutes and held back on any comments until I saw the official notes come out. And so I'd like to know where those can be found so that other people as well can wait to see official meeting minutes before jumping to conclusions.
Meeting minutes should be posted to the town website. And then in person, they get posted, I believe, at the town clerk's office as well. But they should be available on the town website under agendas and minutes.
I think there's a 3-day, period, to make sure that they get up.
Yep.
So it should be up by the 3rd day after the meeting.
Okay, and that's in the committees section of the town website. So they're not on the Board of Ed website then?
No.
This
Okay.
is a town committee, so it would be posted
So
under
make
the
sure people
Strategic
are
Capital
clear where to
Improvement
find them.
Commission Committee meeting minutes.
Very good.
Yeah.
And I also questioned what the goals or what the scope is of the committee, and if that's been officially published anywhere. Because most of the committees have like a statement that goes along with them, what the scope is and what is to be considered. What your goals are, what your objectives are. People are questioning whether we're staying within the scope. So where officially are what that committee is charged with?
When the Board of Selectmen formed the committee, there was a resolution that lays out kind of what the work of the committee is.
Okay.
And that is all public.
And again, where?
And that would be available under Board of Selectmen meeting minutes.
Board of Selectmen meeting minutes?
Yeah, and-
Okay.
Yes,
Mm-hmm.
that would be my advice.
I can check, but I will make sure. I mean, I did see the resolution. I was there the night they passed it.
Yeah.
Actually,
Okay.
it was passed
I
here.
was too.
It was done here. So, and it laid out, it was very well written in terms of what the scope was and the charge of the committee.
Okay.
Yep.
And is there a way that it can get updated in the section of the committees? There's a section on the town website that has all the different committees listed, I believe.
Yep.
And they should have goals associated with each one, no? And rather than trying to find it and going through board meeting minutes, because which board meeting
think that's-
was it?
I think that given the current turnover with the selectmen, that probably let that settle, and that maybe that's a good question for the new first selectman about how or where that is located on the town website.
Very good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure.
Good. All right. I did just load this into the drive tonight, and it's literally from the New Haven Register today. So I took a look at this, and I put it in there along with some legislative proposals from CAPS that are outlining what our legislative priorities are. But I included this article because, yes, this is important, right? This legislative session this year has started. Right? I know the legislators are meeting, and we got some work to do, right? Like, some work needs to be done in several areas of public schools. And I know that the Connecticut Association of Public School Superintendents puts out positions, and I'm often invited to legislative breakfasts and meet with legislators to talk to them about the challenges that schools are facing, right? I share this with you because, in your role as board members, I know you have CABE. I know Meg is very active and will be keeping close tabs on what happens in Hartford, but some changes are needed, right? Some things in Hartford are not functioning in a way that makes our life easy. We'll leave it at that. And even up to yesterday, one thing has happened to us now that is very complicated, and it is reflected in this article. That's why, as Stephanie and I were processing the news Stephanie's going to share with you tonight, it's reflected here. Specifically, you see in here, this article laying out the state legislature is going to be having some rich discussions about these issues. K-12 funding clearly being at the top of the list, right? That, a lot of us perceive the state's cost share that's reflected in the ECS grant is too low. We think that should be higher. Otherwise, a lot of mandates and expenses get pushed down to the town level. That's in the first section there. The second section that talks about higher education, okay, I will let them fight those battles. I clearly think higher education has some needs. But then you see this area of special education, right? That the way the state funds special education through what's called the excess cost sharing grant, I'll take a deep breath, makes our life very complicated because we don't know how much our reimbursement is going to be until we're already halfway through the budget cycle. And when they tinker with that number and tell us that number is lower, it causes us to have to twist ourselves into pretzel to make up for deficits that are caused. And the reason that happens is because the state legislature gives the Connecticut State Department of Education a fixed amount of money. Then that's all they have to work with. On December 31st, we and all districts in the state enter our requests for excess costs. And this is what Sarah and Stephanie work very hard on, so that that percentage above the threshold, which is 4.5 times the per pupil expenditure cost, which is that sort of state's insurance policy that helps us. And as you know, what happens is the state then calculates all of the requests and then looks at how much money they have available that was allocated to them by the state legislature. And if they have enough, great, they fund everybody fully. If they have a surplus, they fund everybody fully and more. But more likely than not, they don't have enough, and then they only give the districts a % of what we otherwise thought we were going to get. It's a nightmare. It's an absolute nightmare to have to manage a budget with that unknown variable and that very uncomfortable email we get, or that posting that Stephanie gets, and you can probably see the look on Stephanie's face that all of the business managers get when they find out what that reimbursement rate is. So, I did, Stephanie shared it with us today, and it looked like I think it was a Ridgefield business manager saying, we need to speak up and be loud. This is not a sustainable approach, right? And it's reflected here, right? So, and you'll see it in both the CAPS position statements, and when I go to the legislative breakfast, I will again speak up, because it's impossible to build a budget in the current system, and it's impossible to manage a budget when you don't know until the middle of January what you're actually getting back, and yet you've made some projections about that. Stephanie, did I explain that well? Am I coloring it the right way? Mm-hmm. Okay. So this article was today, and when we get to Stephanie's report, she's going to talk to you tonight about what our excess cost reimbursement was that we learned about at noon yesterday, right? And the impact that has on this year's budget, which illustrates here in Portland at our sort of level how complicated it is, and it must change. You'll see in my letters that I share with you in your budget book tonight, I can't do this. It is not sustainable. It is not fair. It is not fair to my principals. It is not fair to me. It is not fair to Stephanie. It's not fair to Sarah. It disrupts our organization entirely when the rug gets pulled out from under us in January. I mean, let us know ahead of time, or fully fund it is what they should. They should really not be, I don't care if they have to call a special session, but allocate the money that you commit to people at the % you commit it when you give the tiers. Don't change it based on the requests that you get, based on the expenses statewide. It is unsustainable, it is unfair, and it disrupts everybody in this room intensely, including some very difficult conversations I had to have with this team that works very hard to manage their budgets all year. And I'm very sorry to them, and it frankly makes me a little angry. So Stephanie's going to give you some not so great news tonight, but I wanted to provide this context as this is hot off the press, both because the excess cost reimbursement percentages were released today, and lots of superintendents are having these conversations with their boards tonight, and it's also reflected both in the news and the position statements and the lobbyists and everybody that's getting ready for this legislative session. Let me stop and see if there are any questions.
No, but I would just comment that CABE also has this as a legislative priority, and the CAPS and CABE conference, which is a joint effort, we agreed that we would be one voice on this particular issue at the state legislature, because they have, we have had increased numbers of students who are eligible for special education, and the pot of money has not been expanded. And Yeah, although they did add extra money in a year ago, it wasn't enough, and we ended up with a shortfall again, and so did a lot of other districts. And so we want to use one unified voice. There are 1,400 board members in the state of Connecticut. It's the largest body of elected officials, and the superintendent's number about 150 for all of the districts and schools in the state, and that combined with special ed teachers and other people, we just need to be an army of voices right now, and we can't take no for an answer anymore, because our students are the ones who are the losers in the long run. So that being said, we all joined together. I went to a legislative breakfast, and the superintendents and board members that were there were about 40 of us in the room, and there was Senator Needleman, who's not on the education committee, but there were 5 other legislators, and their ears were burning when they left. They got an earful from all of the superintendents and board members, and we need to continue to make that effort and make sure that this does get funded in the correct way. So join CABE, join CAPS, join whatever organization that you're part of, and let's just make it loud and clear. I'm also angry for the same reason.
Good.
Enough is enough.
Good. And so when Stephanie will talk to you about her report tonight, it's not as bad as last year, not nearly, but it's not great. We're going to be okay. We're going to be okay. What her report is going to share and the context for that is going to affect some of the recommendations I'm able to make based on what we put on the agenda. And don't forget, the agenda was developed before we got the news yesterday. So I do have to change some of my asks and recommendations, and I'll explain to you the implications of those, because they affect these guys trying to run buildings and the lives of the people that are working here.
Yeah.
So it's not great. It's not as bad as last year. We're going to be okay, but I don't like it. It's not fair to anybody in this room in terms of what happens to us with one email and a decision based on what was inadequate funding. Okay, so that said, I'm going to pass these out. And I thought about whether I would pass them out now or at the end of the meeting, but I want to pass these out now.
Let's
Okay.
have
These are your budget books. And I only want to take a few minutes
I have
to,
tissues for
Yeah,
anybody that
that's
needs
all right.
tissues.
Just because they look a little different this
yes,
time.
I need to take a few minutes to just orient you to the new information we're including in them. Because Stephanie and I heard you, right? We heard lots of requests for additional information, and I've included, Angela, one more.
I think Angela has one.
I have one.
Yep.
Who doesn't? Oh, Tim's not here.
Stacy.
Oh.
Stacy.
Also
Yeah.
Stacy will be
We'll just, hang on to that for now.
Okay, so what I've tried to do in this book here is provide you all of the information that you need. Like, this is the definition of transparency. But I'm worried that it's a little overwhelming. So at the same time, I just want to spend a few minutes walking you through the sections, the new sections, so that when we meet next Tuesday, we can talk about the numbers, right? So try not to look at the numbers, right? Just look at the section headings and the information that is contained here. And then we'll talk about the numbers after you've had a chance between now and next Tuesday to digest the numbers. And it starts with a reminder. This is my superintendent's budget. Per bylaws and town charters, I bring this to you. If you think it's perfect, you can approve it as is, and it will become your budget. You can change it any way you want. Adding, subtracting, I would definitely suggest you talk to me and the principals and everybody about what we might recommend, but it's my budget until you vote, and then it's your budget. And then it's your budget that goes forward to the town. Does that make sense? Everybody clear on the process of that? And Angela, I'm mostly talking to you because I know that you're still getting your feet wet with some of these things.
This is Angela's first budget process with us.
Okay, so the first, my transmittal letter. In the first paragraph, I clarify the difference between LEA budget and total budget. I think this has been confusing in the past for the board. We really run we get all kinds of funding sources. When Stephanie and I say LEA budget, we're talking about two things. The money we collect from the property taxpayers in the town of Portland, and the state's contribution to our budget that comes in the form form of the equalized cost sharing grant. So it's local property tax money and ECS money. That's that's when we say LEA, that's what we're talking about. Then we get a whole bunch of other money and grants that come in the form of IDEA and title grants and open choice grants and all of these other grants. Those are extras, right? Really, we're running two budgets. We're running the LEA budget and then all of the other budgets. So I spent quite a bit of time, one, identifying the funding sources, and then so you know what our state ECS grant is, which is up a little bit, and we're happy about, right? And what the town contribution would be in my recommendation. And then I have a whole nother section where I identify for you IDEA, open choice, Title I, Title II, Title III, Title IV, Medicaid reimbursement, excess costs, and all of the other ones, and where those funds are allocated, so that you have a sense of the income coming in.
That's great.
Because I think there's confusion, because the reality is, while we're asking for $25,976,000, the amount we actually spend for everything is $28 million. Right? And I think, Dave, you've been like, wait a minute, that's not the budget. The budget's way more than that. And I think that the confusion has often been the definition between LEA and then non-LEA sources, which are all those grant and things like our participation in open choice and other funding that we have allocated for interventionists and paraprofessionals and teachers and programming and all professional development and all those types of things. The next sections, Dave, I put these here for you. I know what you had asked for was a spreadsheet with the percent increases, right? And then a description of what the percent increase was. I'll be honest, it's just a housekeeping thing. I couldn't get it on a spreadsheet because the font was too small, right? So where I say key budget highlights, and then I'll start with salaries and staffing adjustments, line item 10111 through 13002. Think of that as your column, Dave. That identifies the increase and then what is causing the increase, right? I couldn't get it on a spreadsheet. It would have just been like, you wouldn't have been able to read it. It would have been so think of all of these bolded sections here as that third column that identifies, one, the increase, and then two, what's driving the increase, and then one area, the decrease, and what's driving the decrease. So that sort of number you were looking for that was either red for increase or blue for decrease, and the explanation, that's what I tried to accomplish here. Dave, I'm looking at you. Are you comfortable with that?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's close.
Okay. Well, let me know what I want to be perfect. So let me know if I can. Again, I could try to copy and paste it all into something, but
Well, no. I mean, you talk about salaries and staffing. And then we spend about 2 paragraphs talking about the FTE in and out.
Yep.
But the bottom line is the salary increases are because of the contractual. Is it 4% because of contractual, and is it 1.27 because of the teacher changes up and down, plus and minus?
yeah. And we'll talk about that, I think, at the workshop. Like when we dig into the numbers and move beyond just the housekeeping description of what I tried to accomplish here, I think that's what we're going to spend this time next week unpacking. Okay, so if you keep moving then through these, you'll get to a new section here. I wish I put page numbers. I'm sorry.
Okay, what about it? Oh, mine has it.
Oh, it does. You sure you have a page number?
I do not.
Do not.
Special version.
You have the special version. I gave you the best one. So look at the one, it's at the bottom, it says building and department summaries.
Is
Okay.
it in the first section still?
Yeah,
Page four?
page 4. Yeah, page 4 of my transmittal letter. See where it says
Valley View?
yes, building and department summaries, Valley View. I've given you a breakdown by building. I want you to take a look at our district and the expenses in terms of Valley View, Gildersleeve, Brownstone, Portland Middle School, Portland High School, curriculum instruction and technology, facilities, so you get a more discrete look at it. In a moment, I'm going to show you the budget summary section. I want you to see what the principals asked me for. I gave you their narratives, their requests. I'm going to remind you that I didn't honor all of their requests. You're going to see in some of their requests new positions, new staffing. I removed many of those, and when we meet next week, I'll tell you what I took out. But I think it's important for you to know what their wants are, right? So you to see not only what they have, what I've included in there, but what they asked for that I had to say no to. Because I had to say no to a lot, right? I mean, there are many needs that go unfilled, and I want you to read their narratives so you can understand what they asked for, but then also see through these building and department summaries what I did include. So what's in my transmittal letter is what is included in the budget. And then when you get to their narratives and are reading about what Ryan wrote about what Valley View needs are, not everything he asked for, he got, right? And then I also included things like his school improvement plan, which I think is reflected in his budget requests, even though next year's school improvement plan isn't written yet, and this is the budget for next year. Although you can assume that lots of the things in our school improvement plans are going to carry over into next year, and that we should be funding and supporting those.
Sure.
Charles, I don't see paraprofessionals listed in the staffing numbers.
Keep going. I put them all under student support services. So because it was getting complicated and because sometimes they change.
Shared between buildings?
Shared between buildings, or students move between buildings and para's positions go with them. I decided to put them all under student support services, which I kind of wish I had. Which number is, well, you'll see it there. You'll see the 57. Make sense? Okay. If you go to the page that says central office at the top, you see I am including funding for superintendent, for assistant superintendent, for Stephanie, for Jenny, right, those positions there. This next section here is our non-LEA budget, right? These are all of the funding sources that we're anticipating next year. IDEA, the title grant, state education grant, McKinney-Vento, Perkins, Gildersleeve, I put them all there. Some are obviously TBD, like Gildersleeve, but I laid all of those out there for you, and then I have a whole nother section dedicated to those there.
So question, backing up just a step to the student support services, the 57 paraprofessionals, all of the staffing that's included here, is that just what's being covered by our LEA budget? I know some of the para
No.
positions are covered by grant funding.
We'll see those happen.
So the list of staffing
Correct.
and initiatives is comprehensive LEA and grant funded
Correct.
positions.
Yep, correct.
Great.
And you can say something.
Of course, yep.
If you notice under each school, you'll see a large number, because I wanted to highlight what the actual cost is to run the school. So, you know, when you go to their locations, it's just the principal's request, so it's the supplies, you know, it's the small amount, but I wanted you to see what it actually costs to run, so that includes Bob's stuff, it includes, it lists here what it includes, but that will show what it is cost to run each school.
Right. Which, of course, we thought was important as the town considers consolidation.
Sure.
Right. I
Do
mean, I
we
think
also have a number for the amount of money per student in each school, because it varies from the high school to the elementary school?
We don't do
You
it that
don't
way
break it out
anymore.
anymore?
We
Okay.
don't break it out, I don't give a dollar amount,
Okay.
we ask for what they need, and it's,
Okay.
it's very similar to, I could figure out a per pupil expenditure if I needed to, but we haven't done it like that since Charles
It's
started.
just a basic, all-student expenditure based on, fine, okay.
Yeah. And I got to tell you, Meg, I'm always suspect of the per pupil expenditure number, right?
I am too.
It's deceiving because lots of students cost a lot more than others. It costs a lot more to educate an outplaced student than it does a first grade student who receives just the basic services, right? So when we look at a per pupil expenditure, it includes things that I think paint an inaccurate description of what the actual funding goes to. But that's my opinion, right? I mean, I know it's a common metric. I just don't trust it.
Yeah.
I don't think you can compare districts by saying, well, you only spend $15,000 a year, but you spend $20,000 a year. Well, sure, but if I live in Sharon, Connecticut, and I outsource all of my kids and I only have 10, that number's going to look a lot higher than if I'm in Bridgeport and have thousands of students in one school.
Exactly.
So
Yeah,
it's
I
just
agree.
complicated, and I don't think it's the right way. I don't think the way people use it to say, oh, you are more fiscally responsible than you because you have a higher or lower per pupil expenditure, that I think that paints an inaccurate.
And we are getting away from the DERG as well. We're not
Yes.
using DERGs anymore.
Correct.
So, I just wondered, because I know years ago it was, like $2 per student here and $10 per student there, so, yeah, okay. Thank you.
Of course. And then the very last page of my transmittal letter is the capital improvement numbers. Okay, and I have another section for capital improvements that I'm going to get to. I think I have a very reasonable plan, and I've worked very hard with Bob and Stephanie, and I try to make an argument to the town of Portland, and I'll certainly make that argument with you next Tuesday, and you can see my argument when you read my letter, which we're not going to do tonight because we don't have time. Okay, the next sections then, budget summaries. Those are the building level narratives, the school improvement plans, and the budgets by building. That's new. Right? I think it's important. I'm sorry, my bad. The next section is the budget definitions, the categories, and then the most important thing that you have there, which is looks like this, your budget object summary. Right? That is similar what Stephanie gives you and we'll give you tonight. That's her authorized spending report. To me, this is the dashboard. Right? Yeah. This is our bank account. Right? So much like all of us refer to how much do we have in savings, our 401ks, our Roths, our savings accounts, this is similar. Right? This is what we have, and the inflows and outflows are reflected there. So those numbers and the percent increases should match up nicely with my budget narrative. Next section, I have some statistical data for you. Pretty simple. It's just our staffing roster, which I shared with you last week. I thought it was helpful for you to take a look at. These are the names to the positions, and I know that it's always important that you put a face to a name. I mean, yes, we talk about FTE, but that FTE is also a person. These are our people. This is our community right here. I love this. I mean, this is our family. This is Portland, right? And then the next page I have for you is our enrollment, right? You'll notice in my narrative that I make some suggestions about reducing FTEs in certain areas based on enrollment, and that's the enrollment report that I reference. Okay, the location budgets. Now, this is the new section. This one is building by building. So you see in here the narratives that the principals, Eric, Bob, and Sarah gave me. Please understand as you read their narratives, they didn't get everything they asked for, but I think it's important for you to see what they asked for, right? And as you go through it, you can see their narrative. Stephanie gives you their dashboard in terms of their budget object line items, which match up with the numbers I gave you, and then their school improvement plans. Again, our goals should be driving our budget allocations. So I wanted to remind everybody that what they asked for is, even though this school improvement plan is next year, and this is not next year, it's this year, but it is similar enough. As I look at these school improvement plans, I think many things will be carried over.
Yeah,
so
we work with what we got.
We work with what we got.
Yeah.
Okay. Flip over to student services. That has its whole own section here. This is all of Sarah's requests, including support services, and then you see she talks about IDEA grant and transportation and outplacements and changes that we're making with respect to whether we're using Cheshire Fitness or bringing people in-house. And you're aware of all of these because many of the requests have come through Personnel Committee in terms of changes and hiring that we've made. I think she did a very nice job with her narrative. And then, of course, you can see her budget object description and then the amounts she's budgeting based on what she knows we have now or can reasonably anticipate next year.
Why is there some paragraphs in red or orange?
Don't know.
I think,
It
Sarah,
looks like
when
that's
you
a
put
change to the
chart was
request.
What you actually got versus the request. The red part. The impact.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, this didn't copy out red font.
So say that again, it's what?
So it's the, what would happen or what's happening due to the cuts. So like if you look at under paraprofessionals, because she asked for 62, she only got 57, so she's writing about what the impact is gonna be on the reduction in the cuts that she got. So black is what she requested, red is explaining the cuts and how it's affected.
Okay, and then you see her departmental improvement goals too.
And the reductions are because Charles said, no, you're not, okay, just making sure.
Yep. I made nobody got everything they asked for. You know, and I'll tell you, Angela, it's hard, right? I mean,
Yeah.
but I got to try to bring something that reflects our absolute needs and I think is reasonable. I think if I had brought in everybody's requests, we'd be up over 7.5%, and that's just not happening.
Just to orient us for the location budgets and other budgets, is there a similar easy way to figure out like what they didn't get out of the request?
No, I'm going to talk to you about those.
Okay.
I'm going to go through those with you when
Okay.
at the workshop.
So you're asking for all, so Sarah said what her impacts are. Were you asking what are all the impacts to
If
the
there's
other
an
schools?
easy way to see that
Yeah.
in here.
Yeah, I'll point them out to you. You know, multiple positions were asked for that I would love to have, but I'll be honest, I said no to, and didn't want to. But you know, I'm not going to bring you a 10% increase. I mean, I had to get to a place that I felt was reasonable. Okay, district-wide programs, you know, this is all of Eric's requests, including we got to get to a Chromebook replacement cycle, so you'll see that 244% increase. Understand, we've been running on grant funding. Eric did an amazing job in his time here getting us connectivity grant and funding our replacement cycle with grant funds that in some cases were a function of COVID relief money and other sources. That well is run dry, and you know, we need to get to a replacement cycle or our Chromebooks won't work. So you'll see that in his narrative, and I'll talk to you about how we're gonna support that going forward. Then, of course, the facility services, you get to Bob's budget. Bob does an amazing job with duct tape and paint, but those days we're running out of those days. We must do something to address these aging facilities. I know we have the strategic planning committee here, but you see what Bob is asking for. Then I'm really excited. Flip back the capital budget page. Okay. In the capital transmittal letter, I share a vision. I share a path that I hope you'll consider. I hope the town will consider. I hope the strategic planning committee will consider as we go through the process of beginning to identify the many, 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 many needs, especially at our elementary schools, but also here at the secondary school. We know, because I also included it in here, the bond debt service is expiring. That this will be the last year that we pay off the secondary school. Congratulations, Portland, you own it. Here's the deed. Secondary school is yours. You've done great work over the past 20 years paying it off. You own it now. What you do with the money that's in this year's budget is going to be a really important decision for the town about how that's reallocated going forward for current needs in the district. And we'll talk about this when we meet too, but I would definitely encourage you to give that a read and then come challenge me on my thinking and logic.
Mm-hmm.
And then,
So just to clarify for me, the tab labeled capital, is that included in your overarching?
no,
Oh, so that's separate.
separate.
That's the request that would go first through the capital long-range committee for their recommendation to the Board of Selectmen, and that's considered as a separate
Okay.
piece of the overall town budget.
So there's no, so then just the capital or the facility programs that Bob requested is in there?
Yes.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Correct.
And that's kind of capital as well, right?
No,
No.
those are maintenance.
Just considered maintenance.
100%. You know,
So-
those are things we need to keep the lights on and the buildings running safely. Right?
Okay.
These are things we would do to repair and replace significant things like air handling units and, well, you see them here.
We're talking about Fund 11? Is it,
This is Fund 08.
Fund 08, so it's a separate fund?
Yeah.
Okay.
Maybe that's what is there somewhere I can beef my knowledge up of the difference, because it's still kind of fuzzy for
Yep.
me, I'll take it offline.
We'll do that, yeah, we'll do that, and we can cover that too.
Thank you.
Then the very last tab I have there, these are the non-LEA funding sources. Okay, so again, LEA is the local burden, what we raise through the mill rate from the property taxes, the equalized cost sharing grant from the state, and that's it. Those are LEA. These are all other funding sources, and you'll see they're laid out: IDEA, Title I, Title II, Title III, Title IV, Medicaid reimbursement, open choice, McKinney-Vento, Perkins grant, all of these other things. So I have this broken out for you because it's sort of like another budget, right? That and the positions, each of the, well, not positions, but professional development and other services that these things support.
And these are reflected in the front part in each budget for each school. So these are the grant funded pieces, and these guys are all on the roster as well. So everybody's commingled, but these specific ones are funded by this portion, the rest are funded by LEA.
Thank you.
And does it indicate in here which of these grants where the amount is known versus where the amount is estimated, or is it sort of just, most of them are a best guess for what we anticipate receiving next year?
So
We know IDEA.
IDEA typically goes up a small amount each year. I will say we did get a reduction this year, so that one's, but it's not by much.
Yeah.
So IDEA, it goes based off of some algorithm. Title II, very small increase each year. Title IV is always the same, 10,000. Title III, we're through a consortium, and it always ranges around the same, give or take a couple $100. Open choice, that's again
based on our October enrollment, right?
The enrollment that that's always, knock on wood, has increased.
Yep.
And especially since they've given us the $5,000 professional development piece within that. Open choice, the 580, again, now hearing that 5 students left, that makes me a little nervous that, hopefully we can catch that up next year.
Right.
But it is safe to know that we get the payment based off of October 1.
Right.
So anything that happens after October 1, it doesn't make a difference. We get a payment based off of the census then.
Okay.
So this is, we've had up to 67 at one point, but we've the last couple of years been low, so I've been kind of budgeting at the lower number. So to answer your question, not really. There's not one. Medicaid depends on who signs the paper that authorizes us to do it. The reimbursement from Hartford, how many kids come that have services. So yes and no, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that helps. Thank you.
And look at the very last page with excess cost reimbursement. Right. I mean, we where it says 24-25, we're about to pivot to Stephanie and know that in 24-25 budget, which is now, we budgeted 70%. We just found out it's 62. Right. So in this budget, we're budgeting again for 70%. Is that a smart move? I don't know, because it jerks us around right now, as of today, right? I mean, would it be smarter to budget at 60%? Well, then up goes the ask from the LEA, right?
Charles, do you have like a next round of cuts you would recommend if we as a board came back and wondered what it could look like to like reflect an ECS of 62% for next year? Does that question make sense?
Yeah, I do.
If you're saying be more conservative in estimating that funding.
Do you kind of have in your mind what that could look like?
Yeah, but I don't like it.
Yeah, I'm just thinking that might come up in our conversation next week. So if you have it in mind.
I do. I mean, I've got it in my mind. It's a very dark place. Okay. Not a place I want to go because it reflects services for our children. But yes, I do. And of course, let's not forget too that other things in here that are moving targets again are like our health insurance.
Right.
You'll see in my letter there's a 13% placeholder. We're opening bids coming up, right? We're going to know is 13%. That's also sensitive to the census. How many people join or move or leave the plan, which we're also working as of this week to canvass our folks and see who's coming on or going off. There are all kinds of winds that can blow for or against us.
Sure.
This year the insurance winds are in our sails because fewer people have jumped on our insurance rolls, I think largely because we have some young people and they stayed on mom and dad's plan until they're 26, right? But, you know, now we just hit some rocky seas with what Stephanie's about to talk to next. It's just about, you know, trying to figure out what the reasonable number is and then manage it throughout the course of the year, even knowing things are gonna change. Like, Stephanie and I joke, our budget is only really ever balanced at 12:01 on July 1st, right? Because at 12:30 on July 1st, something will change.
Yeah.
Somebody will join the insurance or leave it, or you know, a new need will come up, or we'll hire somebody at a higher or lower rate than we thought. That's what happens.
So I have a dumb question. Years ago, when I was working in Middletown, I could take insurance if I needed it, but what they said was if you had a spouse and there were 2 insurance plans in your family, the primary one would be, and they wouldn't even offer it to you if you had a husband with an earlier birthday. And so people who didn't need the insurance weren't able to get the insurance. I don't know if that's even legal to do anymore.
It does not sound particularly
But-
legal.
Yeah.
It is also not in compliance with our current contracts.
Well, that's the
Yeah.
contract, and I was under contract too, but the insurance part of it was offered only if
Was
we
that
needed
before
it.
the Pre-Affordable Care Act?
Yeah, it probably was. Oh,
Probably,
yeah,
yeah.
probably, yeah,
Yeah.
it was. Yeah, 1988.
Yeah, Affordable Care Act changed a
Actually.
lot.
Yeah,
You know,
it did.
changed
It
an
did.
awful lot.
Yeah.
All right, so
All right, well.
that was the big.
I told you it was a dumb question.
No, no, no,
such
no
thing,
dumb
no such
questions.
thing, right. So what I've tried to do here, and I've tried to, you know, listen to over the past couple of years, hear what you've been asking for, and clarifications on things like what's the difference between LEA and what's the total budget, and you know, create that explanation of what the percent increases reflect. But there may be other things, right? So I would encourage you that, you know, give this a read, you know, between now and next Tuesday. Certainly, if you have questions, email them to me, right? And what I'll always do is if you email me questions, I'll respond to you and CC everybody, so I give you the question. But I find that process helpful too, because whether it's a housekeeping or a fiscal question, no such thing as a dumb question. Like, ask the questions, because, you know, what I'm committed to is everybody in the town knowing where every nickel is going, and that what the recommendations are, so that you know, you can take informed votes on these things.
So has this type of book been used in the past, or is this the first time we're doing this?
No, we
No, it
get,
is,
every
okay.
year we get a superintendent's proposed budget that looks very similar to this. There's just a few modifications, like including, actually, one of the big ones is including everybody's goals, which I really appreciate having in there as a reminder to have that kind of fresh as we're viewing the school-by-school budgets. I appreciate that.
And the
Do
other thing I really
explanations.
like, and it's smart, is that considering this also in the context of what Eric is about to review with us tonight.
Yeah.
You know, how our goals reflect our fiscal needs, and how those goals and the support that we would provide those goals fiscally shows up in student performance data for better or worse, right?
Right.
And how funds should be flowing to make improvements where they're needed.
Right.
Sort of the loop on
Yeah.
the school improvement.
I appreciate the programming information in terms of the staffing and by school, because I think that we haven't really had that before broken down in a very clear way. So I think that really is helpful in terms of what is actually going on in each building and the cost associated with it. So, thank you.
You're welcome.
I really appreciate
My
that.
pleasure. And thank you, Stephanie, for helping me put it
Yeah,
together.
thank
And
you.
Tricia, for organizing it all for us. I know it's a lot of work. It's a
Yeah,
lot.
no,
Thank
it's a
you, team.
tremendous amount of work. So I'm going to suggest we spend the next week digesting this and come back on Tuesday with our questions, ready to have a good conversation about it.
Good.
Thank you, Charles.
That's everything I have.
All right. Then we will set those aside and we'll move on.
I do.
We'll move on to our report from our Assistant Superintendent for Business and Financial Affairs. Here, Stephanie, do you want my copy?
Yeah, I printed out the wrong one, so I just
Yeah.
wanna make sure I have it in front of me.
Yep.
if there's any questions.
You need both of them?
Yeah, look at it there, too.
There we go. I think I have it on my computer here.
So,
You can look at mine.
I've been trying to format these a little differently, as I change it each time, and you just let me know if what I'm doing is good or bad. So, I started breaking out, almost like looking at the budget, the object, so I kind of broke it out by these sections. And that's how I go through and show, the surplus or deficit in each. Because usually I would only hit, the ones that were in the negative or, in a good positive. I was like, I'm gonna combine everything and kind of give a look into all of it. And then I also added at the end, Fund 11 and Fund 8, what we've been doing. Because usually I think that happens maybe when I do my end of year report, I say what we did, but I'm like, I'll throw it in there. Because we've been doing, a couple different things.
Yeah.
And then so you can see the balances we have. So this, Angela, to
What is
some of the
Fund 11?
points. So these are in addition to LEA, these are other funds that we have. So the Fund 08 is the capital requests that we were talking about. We get allocated a certain amount every year for specific things. And then Fund 11, you'll see, I don't know if you were here, we didn't do a transfer last year.
We did not.
Yeah, we didn't have enough money.
Fund 11 is a maintenance fund that we, when in years when there's a small surplus at the end of the year, we are allowed to move money, surplus, into that fund that allows us to be able to address emergency repairs as they come up during the year.
We move it into Fund
You
11?
move it into Fund 11.
Okay.
Because as you know, LEA budgets end on June 30th, and these funds roll. So the money stays and just rolls with as you go.
Thank you.
And then usually the town gives us about $41,000 also into that account. So we try to keep a decent amount in there if God forbid something happens and we can't fund it out of the local budget. So I just highlighted a few things that we've done, the balance in it right now. So if there's any I know the big one is excess cost. And I hadn't given my report to Tricia when I got the email, and I'm like, oh, do I include it? Do I not include it? And I ended up changing it and including it. So basically what it looks like for us right now, it's not terrible. Last year we budgeted 75% and got 69. And that was rough, and we had a lot more expenses. This year we brought our budget down to 70, hoping we would get 69 again, and we got 62. It's still in the tiers, I believe, but they just lowered the tiers. I think some districts got 59, some got 62, some got 53. It's bad. But for us, so we were anticipating if at the budget at 70% that we were going to get $542,141.
Where are you reading from?
The last paragraph.
Okay. thank
Under
you.
tuition and private sources.
Thank you.
Yeah. So with the current outplacements that we have right now, and what was submitted in December to the state, we were anticipating at 70% $542,141. When I got the email with the breakdown, we're getting $390,219, and it's a difference of $151,921. Last year we were in a bad spot because we were already in a deficit, and that just added to it. This year we've been in a surplus. Our medical, somehow, surprisingly, is in a surplus. Our certified salary lines are in a surplus. So we have ways to cover some of it. But we are unfortunately in about $11,000 deficit right now, like as of today. I know there's things changing. There's somebody that graduated, but there might be more outplacements. So I'm not comfortable giving an actual number until I get those pieces from Sarah. But as of status quo, what we have right now for expenses projected out is about $11,000 deficit in the negative. So it's not as bad, but I don't like being in the negative when 2 days ago we had a $150,000 surplus.
Yeah.
But that's what happens. So if anybody has any questions, if you want me to explain anything else about it,
I do have a question about, so you said we'll be receiving 390,000. Can you refresh my memory about, does that number change as our outplacement situation might continue to change through the remainder of the year? If we end up having additional outplacements, I know when we spoke earlier, you were saying that, at this point, they're not gonna meet the threshold.
No, they're not gonna
Okay.
be, because our threshold is $96,000.
Right.
So
Okay.
anybody probably from this point on, unless they're in a really high-cost facility, wouldn't even qualify
They're not gonna
for
hit that
I
threshold
mean,
in
we
the
still
remainder
have-
of the year.
If anything, it might go down.
It will.
With the person
I mean, it could.
graduating, and it may actually go down.
So that number, the 300, it's not that the number is set in stone at this point, the way that like
percentages.
the percentages, but if our So whether it goes up or down.
Right.
It will fluctuate based on the percentage still.
Correct.
Gotcha.
So you're saying the 60% is the percentage that we will get, whether we have
62.
more students or less students?
Right, it'll be 62.07, but the number will change depending on, once Olivia puts in the March
Right.
calculation, and then usually, so like we haven't found out this year, so, because we do March and then we do June 30 as well.
Right.
So then we'll get an adjustment, whether it's positive or negative, coming up, and it usually, so like I have this paper here that I get, so we get our ECS. This year is 4,775,020, but after they do that final calculation, that could go up or down. Last year, we had an additional $87,000.
Right.
Right.
Because they took, must have had extra students, whatever, in excess cost. But the year before, we were negative. So I don't know that piece of it yet. So there's 3 different points that you enter your excess costs. It's December 31st, March 31st, and then June 30th. And then they adjust each, but the percentage will stay. I mean, unless anything drastically changes at the state, but I don't know how that can happen this year at least.
Well, let's just hope that the whole state doesn't have increased numbers of students, which is what happened last year. The numbers just kept going up and the pot kept getting smaller and smaller.
Well, I mean, there's a spreadsheet right now with all districts putting in. I mean, there's districts that are 2 million short. I mean, they're the bigger districts.
So, okay, so that actually brings up a very good question, Meg, because my memory from last year is that we were finding out in like March, April, that our percentage was being reduced further because of increased needs. So is it possible that our percentage could be reduced even further after the March filings?
I don't remember it going. Did it go lower?
It did.
Did it?
It was March. I mean, it was early April when we found out last year.
We were anticipating 80 and it went to 71 and now we're talking about 60.
I'd have to go back and look, because I have so many numbers in my head and so many different things in my head.
Yeah.
I can go back and look. I do remember when the drastic hit was, but I thought that was at this time.
No, I think it was
My
March.
memory is that it was like
Okay.
March, April. It was
Yeah.
extremely late breaking
Okay.
and very frustrating for that reason.
Yeah.
Let's hope it
And we
doesn't
were
go
lucky
down.
because ours was such a small drop in the bucket compared to millions of, deficits in.
And I would hope if people's, population increases, that they're in the same boat, that their threshold is high enough where
Right.
it wouldn't impact it that much. But I'll have to go back and look and see.
Okay.
They don't really give history, once they change it, they only give it at that point in time, so I
Right.
can't go back and look and see what
Right.
it was before that.
Right.
But I'll go back and look at my emails, to refresh my memory.
Yeah, I'd be curious.
There's an old saying that figures lie and liars figure, so I'm not saying the legislature is lying, but they fiddle with this formulas enough that, you end up being befuddled about it. It's not clear, it's not transparent, so. that's
So
enough.
with this document that you said is being talked about with the legislature now, when would we expect, if there was going to be any change, would it impact us this year or not until next year?
This year.
They
So-
could
It can-
fully
So
fund the
something
ECS
could-
this year. I mean, they're
Okay.
the legislature. As long as they pass it and the governor signs it. And I promise you that a lot of legislators' phones are lighting up as of yesterday.
Oh, yeah.
So
We thought
it
that
is
last year,
possible
too,
that
though.
Yeah,
that
we
62
did, right,
could
but I
go
mean,
up?
Go down.
I wouldn't count
It
on
won't
it
go-
though,
it won't go
Angela.
up.
I think, yeah.
Most likely not up.
Most likely not. But I will say, this board has talked at points in the past about, do we want to put together a letter to the legislature, other boards of education have? This would be a particular issue of interest to us. It's been 2 years in a row that it's had a significant impact on our budget. If there's interest in composing a letter to send to the legislature, we could work on that. If there's interest in inviting Senator Needleman and Representative Carpino to a board meeting to have a conversation with them and share how these mid-year changes to the excess cost formula have an impact on small towns like us, we can do that. So I guess, is there an interest in that?
Or go to the legislative breakfast.
Yeah.
I mean,
Well,
those
the
are-
legislative breakfasts are one way, but more effectively, writing a letter, telling stories. When we went to hearing about the free lunches and breakfasts, there were some compelling stories, personal stories that came out of that, and the legislators listened. And they do. They will listen. They will document who's calling, and they want to hear from their constituents, because guess what? Their election depends on it. I mean, if we don't like what they're doing, then the vote is the power of what we have. But hopefully we can tell the story and they can listen. I'm a big believer in the power of the people coming together and speaking their mind, and I think we need to do that. In this case, I think it would be a powerful thing to invite the, maybe the education committee chairs to a board meeting, because they're the ones that are going to actually conduct hearings on this, and I think we should write letters.
I would be in support of the board writing a letter.
Absolutely.
And possibly inviting our representatives to this, because they didn't attend the legislative breakfast that I was at, so I don't know if they regularly do, but.
They do, and
Hearing from
ours,
us here would be
Senator
helpful.
Needleman was there on the 19th of December. We had
Oh,
ours
he
down in
was.
Westbrook.
Okay, that's good.
So that was recent. And a lot of people are intimidated by legislators, or by, I don't know who they are and I can't call them. Oh, yes, you can. And I can tell you how to find out where they live and where they are, so that you can make those calls. No, not where they live.
Not where they live.
No, not
dox.
that direct, but I mean, you know, where their offices are at the LOB, and where we go on, we have a day on the Hill, and we go up. No, not where they live.
Okay.
Those are the old days, sorry.
If there's an interest in a letter, is there an interest in a letter that, you know, Charles, we could draft, you and I could draft a letter on behalf of the board. We could bring it to our next meeting and take a look at that, send it to the education committee members. Yes?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Great. All right.
So I don't know if anybody has any other questions.
No, but I think
No, I mean, I appreciate the update. I am relieved that, you know, an $11,000, it's terrible to be in this position when we have been managing so carefully and things were going smoothly. $11,000 feels like a manageable, we should be able to manage that. But it's, you know, it is really extremely frustrating.
And we'll get an update from you at our next board meeting, regular board meeting, so I think being able to track it closely would be good.
Yeah.
It's frustrating when you have no control over something.
Yeah.
I can control as much as I can with what everybody spends, and
Yeah.
but things that are out of your control, that's the frustrating part.
Yep, I hear that. I will say, Stephanie, that I like this update format, broken down by object that way. It's, I like that. Any other questions for Stephanie? No? All right. Then we are going to move along. We have our Director of Curriculum Instruction and Technology here with us for a presentation of our next generation accountability results.
Yeah, I didn't do a presentation. Right, you're gonna use this, right? Yeah. And I moved this one.
Okay, there's some slides Dylan's getting up on the screen. I'm gonna give, this is a supplemental data packet. I'll kind of explain how this relates. The slides that are gonna come up.
I think just let it warm up, maybe.
Thank you, Eric.
Thank you.
Whoa.
Whoop, you all right?
Did I unplug anything?
I don't think so.
No, I think we're okay.
All right. Good evening. So, can you guys hear me? Is this
Yes, we can.
close enough, Dylan? Good? Okay. All right, so we've presented achievement data a couple of different ways to the board, and I think we've tried to, over the past few years, land on the type of presentation that gives the board the most useful information and is delivered in a way that's easiest to understand. We take in a ton of data to inform school and district improvement planning. In the past, we've presented things like granular, smarter, balanced assessment performance data by grade level. And we found that while that's really important for improvement planning at the school level, it doesn't move the board's thinking or budgetary thinking a whole lot. Last year, instead of presenting, well, last year we did both. We presented kind of traditional assessment data to the board, and then in a board retreat, we introduced Board of Education members to what's known as the Next Generation Accountability System. And the thinking at the time was this is the data that really presents the snapshot of what our districts and schools look like across indicators that the state has deemed to be most important or most reflective of the overall health or achievement of a district or school. So that's what I'm going to present tonight. It's inclusive of standardized assessment results, and I'll explain what that looks like in a minute. But in tonight's presentation, you're not going to hear how did our fifth graders perform on smarter balanced mathematics. You'll see how our schools performed on math assessments as reflected in the accountability index. So this will become clearer as we go along, but understand this is a little bit different than how we've presented data in public forum previously, but it's in line with how we presented that data to the board in retreat last year. Okay. Can we move forward to the next slide? Okay, so as we covered last year, and I'm going to kind of quickly re-educate the board and audience on what is the Next Generation Accountability System. So it functions effectively as a school or district, school in this case, and district report card. In 2015, there was federal legislation called the Every Student Succeeds Act that required states to develop accountability metrics for their schools and districts. And if they couldn't, the government would prescribe one. Connecticut answered the call and developed the Next Generation Accountability System, proposed it to the federal government, and it was approved for use in the state of Connecticut as our accountability system for districts and schools. The Next Gen system is comprised of 12 potentially measured indicators. It varies by grade span, which affects how schools are measured. Not every indicator can be measured at every grade level, and I'll explain that as we go along. It manifests in an annual report that's published on EdSite. In EdSite, there's a public EdSite, and there's a private or secure EdSite that's password protected and available only to certain district personnel. The accountability data is published annually on public EdSite. So this is publicly available data. These school and district report cards are available to anyone with internet access who can access EdSite. And all of the information that's presented here tonight is available on EdSite. It was literally harvested and compiled from EdSite. Based on accountability results within this system, schools are classified levels 1 to 5. And within those levels, there's 3 larger categories: schools of distinction, focus schools, or turnaround schools. I'm going to cover later in the presentation what those classifications mean. It's important to note 2 things. A district is not classified by level. A district you cannot be a district of distinction, a focus district, or a turnaround district. That can only be, those categorizations can only be prescribed at the school level. And of our 5 schools, Valley View does not qualify for a categorization, and they cannot qualify to be a school of distinction or a focus school or a turnaround school because given their grade span, they only have 2 indicators they're measured on, so they don't have enough indicators to yield a categorization. The results of this accountability system directly support our district and school improvement planning. The results you're seeing tonight are accountability results from last year. They're released by the state annually in early November. Okay, so we've engaged in the process of improvement planning for this year, and in large part, by the time we receive our accountability system metrics, they're not of surprise to us. We have other data sources that have been made available to us ahead of public release, so they tend to confirm what we already have thought and what we've already developed improvement plans around. Okay, next slide. So how are next generation scores calculated? Some indicators, primarily indicators 1, 2, and 4, compare two groups of students via separate scores. So they'll look at performance of all students, and then they'll pull out from that entire student population the achievement metrics of high needs students. That high needs classification, that's considered a super group by the state, a super subgroup, if you will. What determines whether or not you are a high needs student? You fit into one or more of the following categories. You receive free and reduced lunch. You are, I apologize for the outdated terminology, a multi-language learner, formerly an English language learner, same idea, different terminology we use now. Or a student with disabilities, meaning you're receiving IEP services. So if you fit any one or more of those categories, you fit into the super subgroup of high needs students. And what these groups have in common that we know is that they disproportionately include students of color and students of low socioeconomic status across all districts, across all schools, across all educational systems. It's important to note that on the EdSite Secure side of things, we can look specifically at the performance of subgroups like African American students, Asian American students, female students, male students, free and reduced lunch students who are Asian American. We can kind of dice up the data a lot more aggressively than what's available in EdSite Secure. EdSite Secure compares performance across two metrics, all students or high needs, across those three indicators listed. And we'll go indicator by indicator so you'll get a better picture of what I need. Each school in the district have a total number of attainable points based on the number of scored indicators within that grade span. So the high school is scored on all 12 indicators because those indicators are they have relevance to all students in grades 9 through 12. They can be measured for every student in grades 9 through 12. Valley View, as I indicated, is only scored on 2 indicators because, for example, standardized testing does not occur until grade 3. That's beyond the grade span of Valley View School, state standardized testing. So you'll see the breakdown. As a district, we are scored on 12 indicators, 1,450 possible points. You see the breakdown as we go down the line. It gets less and less and less. Valley View, 100 possible points scored on 1 of 12 indicators. And the way we get our results is via an accountability index score. That's like your overall grade. And your index score is your total points earned divided by the maximum possible points. So the math is not this simple. But if you had 100 possible points and you earned 70, your accountability index score would be 70. You would have earned 70% of the possible points. So again, this will start to take shape, but that's an overview of the system. Next slide, please. So in this presentation, you're going to see slide-by-slide data snapshots from EdSite Public of Portland's performance at the district level for all 12 next-gen indicators, plus some sub-indicators where applicable. So, for example, indicator 1 has indicator 1A, 1B, 1C, 1D, 1E, 1F. You'll see all of that data tonight. You'll see achievement gap data for the district and for each school, and you'll see the school classification status for each school. Were they a level 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, distinction, focus, or turnaround. In the supplemental packet you have in front of you, you will see indicator by indicator data for district and each school. So you're going to see on the slides in front of you trend data for our entire district. In the packet is school by school breakdown and some other points described here. You'll see our district scores versus the state of Connecticut scores. So how did Portland compare to state averages? And state averages are inclusive of all 201 districts in the state of Connecticut that are scored on accountability on the Next Gen system, including Portland. So Portland is included in that data set. Then you will also see are district indicator scores versus the average scores of Shoreline Valley Conference districts. So those are districts in our immediate geographic area, districts that in many instances aren't economically diverse from us. If we consider ourselves, who are we in competition with? You know, athletically, we're in competition with Shoreline Valley. We collaborate closely with Shoreline Valley, so we might consider ourselves maybe academically in competition, or how do we stack up against other Shoreline Valley districts? Those are 10 surrounding districts, and when you see that data presented, understand that I've excluded Portland's data. So the Shoreline Valley is comprised of 11 districts. The average score data that you're seeing is of 10 districts, not including Portland. So it's Portland versus the other 10 Shoreline Valley districts. Okay? So before we go forward, why don't we just take a quick flip through the supplemental data packet so you can acclimate yourself to it. So it's a lot of data. I'll draw your attention to kind of specific things that stand out in this data, but the packet you have in front of you after the title page, you see Portland Public Schools Accountability Index results for 23-24. You'll see the results from last year in the middle column, and then you'll see the change. If the change is a positive number, it means our result improved. If the change is a negative number, it means our result declined from 22-23. Okay? On the next page, you'll see Portland Public Schools versus the state of Connecticut. Again, that's all 201 districts. Same setup. What did Portland earn in 23-24? What was the state average in 23-24? And what was the difference? Again, where the difference was a positive number, we outperformed the state. Where the third column reflects a negative number, we underperformed the state average. Keep flipping. We're going to take time to go through this within the presentation. The next page is Portland Public Schools versus Shoreline Valley districts. Again, that's set excluding Portland. What was the percentage of points that Portland earned per indicator? So again, that reflects if there were 10 available points for that indicator and you earned 9 points based on your performance, your percentage of points earned would have been 90% to keep the math clean. So obviously you want a higher percentage of points earned. And then the middle column is what was the average percentage of points earned across the other 10 Shoreline Valley Conference districts. And then I did the third column a little bit differently here. Across those 10 districts, it actually should be 11 districts, I apologize. Where is Portland situated? So where would we be out of the 11 Shoreline Valley schools? Where it says 10, that should just be 11. I apologize.
With 10th being, or like worst? Or
10th being worst, first being best. And then beyond that, what we're not going to spend a lot of time doing, again, this is a district snapshot, but the information is there for you, are school-by-school breakdowns of each indicator they were scored on. So you'll see Portland High School has the most data available, Valley View has the least data available. Again, Portland High School scored on all 12 indicators, Valley View scored on one of 12 indicators. Good? Okay. We'll take more time as we go through, but that was meant to situate you to what's in front of you. Okay, can we jump to the next slide? Okay. So what I'm going to present to you first is the Accountability Index overall performance, a 5-year trend. You'll see the asterisk next to 5-year trend. It's important to note that due to disruption from COVID, there was no data reported for the 2021 school year. So the past 5 years are really 6 chronological years. It's the past 5 years for which we have data. Now I'll say, when I took the position, the challenge that we set out for the leadership team, for our schools, for our district, was to improve performance and achievement levels to pre-pandemic levels of performance. That remains the charge. You'll see in many instances we're not yet there. I think it's important to note that there's a chronology here that Dr. Britton worked hard to educate the board on. When we look across this 5-year data snapshot, I'm just going to give a couple examples here. This year's we could consider the 2021 school year and the 21-22 school year the most heavily COVID disrupted school years of the pandemic. We began to come out of the COVID pandemic in the spring of 2022. So while there's no data reported for 2021, we were still in the pandemic in 21-22. The state had a 1-year pause from accountability. The pandemic was still going on when accountability measures came back, and standardized testing resumed in person and hybrid during the 21-22 school year. We were still, again, in the pandemic. So I just want to kind of remind the board that when we're talking about student populations, I'll just give a couple examples. This year's senior class in our heaviest COVID years were 9th and 10th graders. This year's 8th grade class, last year's senior class, so we're looking at 23, 24 data. Last year's 9th graders in our heaviest COVID years were 6th and 7th graders. Last year's 7th graders in our heaviest COVID years were 4th and 5th graders. So that's going to become important as the presentation goes on and we start to look at achievement gaps, and we'll be talking a little bit more about our personnel or staffing profile against our ability to close achievement gaps. And it's just important to note where I want the board to think about where do our most complete systems of intervention and special education lie at what grade spans? What does performance look like at those grade levels? And what would performance have looked like at those grade levels during the pandemic and for students who spent those years of the pandemic in those grade levels where we had stronger or weaker systems of tiered interventions and supports. So if you look at the screen, again, this is the 5-year accountability index trend for Portland Public Schools as a district. Again, after that second dot would be the gap year. We've now had 3 consecutive years of data coming out of the COVID break year. And you'll see we're close to, from an accountability index standpoint, the performance level that we were pre-COVID, but we're not there yet. So work remains, but we're on an upward trajectory in the years coming out of COVID. And that's really, again, those last, the right-hand side 3 dots. This next, if you hit the button, don't advance the slide, but just hit any button on the screen, a graphic should pop up. There you go. So that's what performance data looks like across the past 5 years at each of our schools. And I couldn't get the snap. This was the way it was situated on Insight, so I apologize that Valley View's on the right and Biz is on the left. But let's start far right. If you look at Valley View, the one indicator they're scored on is chronic absenteeism. So you'll see it went way down after COVID. And we've identified that as a problem. And that's been a problem statewide. We conditioned people through COVID that if you're not feeling well in any way, stay home. Mental health was, protected, recognized, honored like it's never been honored before. And the result of those efforts were larger numbers of students staying home. Also, I think some of the difficulties of resuming schooling after the pandemic proved overwhelming for kids, and we saw higher numbers of absences. Valley View has done incredible work turning chronic absenteeism around. We go next to Gildersleeve. Gildersleeve is scored on assessment metrics and chronic absenteeism, and you see the overall projection. There was a slight dip 2 years ago, but they shot up last year. If you look next at the middle school, still rebounding from what was a significant COVID dip in that 3rd data point, but performance has stabilized at this point. If you look at Biz, which is on the far left, we see similar. There was a significant dip in the year coming out of COVID, and then we're on a sharp upward trajectory. And finally, if you look at the high school, you'll see a more up and down pattern. That's largely the result of chronic absenteeism data, which we'll talk about, and we've worked hard to improve this year. I should note we also have our principals present, so if you go into any more of these data points, feel free to ask specific questions at any time. Interrupt me. Happy to answer questions or have our principals speak to any of the data points that we present. It's not only chronic absenteeism that's keeping performance at the middle school and high school from improving as sharply as it is in our elementary schools. What I'm going to help the board to understand is we have a declining picture of tiered supports and services that begins at grade 5. And by the time our students get to high school, there is no system of pre-special education tiered supports available to students. So our inability to improve student achievement really starts to diminish beyond grade 5 and is seriously impacted through a lack of tiered supports and services at the high school. More to come at that, and at the middle school. Next slide, please. So let's start to look at each individual indicator. And while the data is on the screen that gives us the district snapshot, this may be where you're flipping through and taking a glance at what does this look like versus the state. So indicator 1A and 1B speaks to English language arts academic achievement as measured on state standardized assessments. So if we're looking strictly at the high school data point, that's going to be reflected in the school day SAT. If we're looking at any of our schools spanning grades 3 through 8, that data is going to come from largely the Smarter Balance, and then any students that take the English language arts portion of our Connecticut alternate assessment, or our CTAA. The blue line represents the performance of all students. The orange line represents the performance of our high needs subgroup. And remember, high needs is not synonymous with special education. High needs also includes students who may not be special education but who receive free and reduced lunch, or students who are not special education or are not receiving free and reduced lunch but may be multi-language learners, or students who fit any one or more of those categories. Okay? So the trend data here is that we're slowly improving the performance of all students, where we've had inconsistent kind of a downward trajectory heading into and after COVID, and then a little bit of growth, and then a little bit of dip of our high needs students. Just really quick, for the state, for indicator 1A, performance of all students, we're 1.8 percentage points better than the state. For the performance of high needs students, we're 1 percentage point worse than the state average. Sorry, that was the first page. That was Portland Public Schools improved the performance of all students 1.8% and decreased in the performance of high needs students 1%. Compared to the state, the picture is a little bit better. We're 10.6% better than the state average in the performance of all students, and 5.4% better than the state average for the performance of our high needs subgroup. If we look across Shoreline Valley, where do we stand amongst the 11 districts? For all students, we'd be in 4th place, if you will, for the performance, the ELA performance of all students. When we look at the performance of our high needs subgroup, we would be in 8th place of 11 districts. Next slide, please. Similar slide, math academic achievement. So you'll see again, a dip after COVID, moderate improvement in the years since COVID, and then a very similar picture when we look at our high needs subgroup. You'll see, obviously, if it's going up, there was slight percentage. If it's going down, there's slight decrease. That's on the average of about 1 or 2% each way. If we look at how that compares to state performance, math achievement for all students, 10% above state average. Math achievement for high needs students, 4.8% above state average. If we look at Shoreline Valley, the math performance of all students would put us in 4th place in that conference. The math performance of our high needs subgroups would put us in 7th place. Next slide. Science academic achievement. So this is through the NGSS assessment and the Connecticut alternate science assessment. Again, you see a downward trend, but one that increased relatively sharply last year, but our high needs subgroup performance continues to decline. If we look against state averages, 4.8% better, sorry, 7.1% better for all students than the state average, 2.9% better for high needs subgroup than the state average. If you look at the science performance of all students against Shoreline Valley, we would be in 5th place. If you look at the science performance of our high needs subgroup, we would be in 10th. Next slide. Okay, indicator 2. Indicator 2 measures academic growth where growth models exist. Growth models exist only on certain assessments. A growth model does not exist for the school day SAT. So academic growth is not measured on the SAT assessment. So this slide presents academic growth for students in the area of English language arts as measured on the Smarter Balanced Assessment, which is primarily administered in grades 3 through 8. Again, the blue line is the performance of all students. The orange line is the performance of high needs students. And again, you'll see we've managed to close the growth gap between our all students and our high needs students. If we look quickly at state averages, academic growth for all students against state average, 8.2% better than state average. For high need students, 9.8% better than state average. And in the Shoreline Valley Conference, we would be in first place for both performance levels. Next slide, please. Academic growth for math, a little bit different story. So you see, in general, our performance is lagging. We did have slight improvement for both all students and high need students in this area. 1.2% better than state average for all students, 3.2% worse than state average for our high need students. And if you look at all student performance for Shoreline Valley, we'd be in 6th place. And if you look at performance of high need students, we would be in 9th place. Next slide. A growth model does exist for our MLL students, our multi-language learners who take the Las Links assessment each year. And this is growth towards English language proficiency as measured in areas of literacy growth and oral growth towards proficiency. So you see relatively very strong performance in the area of literacy growth. For MLLs, that's 12.6 percentage points above state average. And in the Shoreline Valley Conference, that would be 2nd of 5 reporting schools. So data is suppressed if the N size is less than 20. In the Shoreline Valley Conference, there are 6 districts whose N size is less than 20. But of the 5 districts that are reported, Portland being one of them, we'd be in 2nd place. The performance of the oral performance of our students, however, would be in 5th place of 5 reporting districts. Just important to note, our current ML to staffing ratio is 49 ML students to 1 full-time ML teacher. Next slide, please. Chronic absenteeism. So you'll see that indicator 3 is not listed. Indicator 3 is assessment participation rate. It is a state mandate that 95% of your populations must participate in all state assessments. It's not reported out as an indicator that affects your index score, but if you have a less than 95% participation rate, it automatically knocks you down 1 category. So it's not reported out as a separate indicator. It's assessed at the very end. If you are a category 2 school or district, but you had a 92% participation rate on assessments, you'd become a category 3 school automatically. We did exceed 95% as a district. Chronic absenteeism rates. We've worked hard to stabilize. You saw, obviously, room for concern. During and coming out of COVID, our rates have climbed. We've developed chronic absenteeism protocols that have helped us to address these issues. Those protocols are in their first year of development. Our chronic absenteeism rate for all students is 10.5 percentage points better than the state average, as high as it looks there. At the state level, it was 25% last year. It's 0.2 percentage points lower than the state average for high need students. However, when we look at our performance for chronic absenteeism against Shoreline Valley districts, we'd be in 9th place for all students, and we'd be in 9th place for our high need students. So we have developed pretty aggressive response plans and implemented them this year in response to our chronic absenteeism data. Next slide. College and career readiness. This is only assessed at the high school, so although our district snapshot is the result of 5 schools' performance, certain indicators like this one only come from the performance of students at the high school. So college and career readiness coursework, this measures the percentage of students in grades 11 and 12 participating in at least one of the following: 2 courses in AP, IB, or dual credit, or 2 CTE courses in one of 17 career clusters, or 2 workplace experience courses in any area. You can see our performance data there. I can't read the bullet. Can someone, it's in the high 90%, I believe.
93.6.
That places us, percent taking courses, we are right at the state average. In the Shoreline Conference, that places us in a 9-way tie for first. 100%, but you can't really get much better. Next slide, please. As a consequence of putting more kids into advanced courses and taking away barriers for enrollment, you have students running up in these courses against, most often with AP courses, difficult end of course exams. With a lack of tiered supports available to students taking more difficult coursework, our exam pass rates are suffering. And you see that data reflected here. So our percentage of students passing exams is 3.3% better than the state average, but in the Shoreline Conference, we would be in 9th place. Next slide, please. On track to high school graduation, again, this is measured at the middle school as a preparatory accountability data point, but it doesn't factor as heavily into their overall accountability index as it does at the high school. This is the percentage of 9th grade students earning at least 6 full credits in their first year of high school. There's a positive correlation to high school graduation when students are taking that number of credits against their required course load of 26 or their credit load by graduation. So it's given to the middle school as how are we graduating from our middle school 9th graders who are prepared to take this number of credits. And you'll see that the data dipped during COVID, and it's still relatively low. On track to high school graduation, we are 2.6% better than the state average. On track to high school graduation for Shoreline Valley, we would be in last place. We're going to talk more about these data points in a moment. I'm just going through the data.
Is there a flat gray line for high need students at the bottom?
That is not. That's year over year.
Okay.
So those are just, that's not a flat gray line. That's just the horizontal axis.
So do you have a chart that shows the 6-year graduation students with high
Yep,
needs?
that's on a future slide.
Okay, thanks.
So the 3 radio buttons at the top, this is the first button, the next slide will be the second button. It's actually the next indicator. So they're presented together. Indicator, again, these are snapshots from EdSite Public. Indicators 7, 8, and 9 are presented on the same graph. I just isolated the radio buttons onto 3 different slides, so it's 1 indicator per slide. So if we go to the next slide. This is high school graduation, 4-year adjusted cohort graduation rate. So this is the percentage of first-time 9th graders who graduate with a regular high school diploma in 4 years or less. And this is the 2023 cohort. So it's important to note that that 2023 cohort were 9th and 10th graders during the pandemic. So when we look at that data, we keep that in account. We're 2 percentage points, we're 3 percentage points worse than the state average, and we are in last place in the Shoreline Valley. Next slide, please.
Can you talk just one more, like say a couple more sentences about the impact of COVID on this? You said it, but just to help connect the dots.
So it's not only the impact of COVID, it's students in the high school, and I'm going to get to this later, but when students are struggling at Portland High School academically and requiring scientifically research-based interventions that are delivered through intervention teachers, we have no employed interventionists at Portland High School, 0. So the best students can do is try to get help from their teachers after school, and our teachers do a tremendous job of providing help to students when they can. But it's different to providing our students ongoing, intensive support that is usually delivered in full academic settings in addition to their coursework. We do not have an SRBI system in any way, shape, or form at the high school. Now, Principal Lawson and her staff have done the best they can with what they have available to them, including the development of a flex period in which students can use that time to seek academic help. but it's different than being able to assign students within their daily schedule to academic support periods on the regular education side of things. This isn't like special education where we can mandate service hours to kids, mandate that students receive intervention, and we don't have individuals within our staff to deliver those interventions.
So what changed? Because we didn't have that before COVID either, right? So is it fact that the needs have increased so much greatly because of COVID?
COVID exacerbated learning gaps. You know, if there was a small learning gap before COVID or at the onset of COVID that you may have been able to remediate through a little bit of extra help with the teacher, over the 2 years of a disruptive COVID pandemic, that became a gaping hole in a student's abilities and what they're able to demonstrate as learners. And so these students, it's important to note, like, these students continue to progress through grade levels. During COVID, they went on and completed 9th grade and completed 10th grade. And we did the best we could in the middle of a pandemic to provide as much support and service. But when they came back to us once the pandemic was ended or was over, as 11th graders, their learning gaps were multiplied exponentially.
Yeah.
I
It's
will also say that I think it is important for the board to understand that, I'm going to speak candidly here, that our budget drivers, our contractual budget drivers, our insurance budget drivers, our facilities budget drivers, we know these things have exploded. Our special education budget drivers have exploded. The board, the district has to understand that on our general education, teaching and learning side of things, we have taken massive cuts. Massive cuts to personnel, supports, services, what we're able to provide students so that we can stay afloat as a district satisfying those other more weighty drivers. That's a very hard reality, but in the absence of those supports and services, you cannot close achievement gaps. And it's very hard just to maintain, like it's hard to just maintain an achievement gap. It's like you're either closing it or it's growing. Status quo with achievement gaps does not exist, especially in the absence of tiered supports. And I'm going to show the board very clearly where we have been able to build complete systems of tiered supports. And how we've been able to do that, the results speak for themselves. We've not been able to do that at the middle and high school, and that's where we have the most profound gaps, and that's where our data is suffering. Not because we don't have good leadership, not because we don't have incredible teachers, it's because we're trying to field a baseball team without a third baseman, a left fielder, and a shortstop. And balls are going to get through to the outfield. Balls are going to get hit out of the park, and it's hard to win.
It's also hard not to make a correlation between this drop in graduation rate and some of these other statistics as well, to correlate that with the massive bump in chronic absenteeism at the middle school and high school specifically. So it's hard not to imagine that those two things aren't inextricably linked as well.
Coming to school certainly helps.
But with some of the other, when we get to those slides, we'll look at them more deeply. But with some of the percentages of absenteeism, if you've got,
but we have
such
been
a
able to
massive
close achievement gaps with high rates of chronic absenteeism in our lower elementary schools. Not closing them to the point of non-existence.
Right.
But, yes, the most important thing are students coming to school. Now, once they're in our midst, the second most important thing is to meet their needs. And at the middle and high school, we are not positioned to meet the needs of struggling learners through an absence of tiered supports and services. And that really means people. And that really means money on the teaching and learning side. And I say that understanding that money is very tight, and the drivers are the drivers, but there's a teaching and learning budget, and then there's the other budget. And that other budget is super important. You gotta be able to pay your teachers and pay your insurance and keep your lights on and make sure your facilities are safe. But if we want to affect student achievement, we need to fund industry standard positions that affect student achievement. And I'm gonna get into that. We're at indicator 9 of 12. So this is kind of the data dump, and then I'm gonna kind of give the bigger picture.
I just got a quick question. just because I want to know your opinion, we got a lot of money from the government, ESSER funds. Are you saying we didn't use them appropriately, or we didn't have enough, or we didn't have enough to go as long as you think we should have gone?
We used ESSER funds effectively. The challenge with ESSER funds, and I support Dr. Britton, his thinking was always, we're not gonna build a cliff of positions, right? I mean, grant money is excellent, but when the grant money runs out, if you can't maintain it as an obligation, then it's fool's gold. We're kind of seeing, listen, if the board doesn't fund Chromebook replenishment, we're gonna see that. Our Chromebook system will fail. So could it have propped us up for a couple of years? Yes, but in the absence of that ESSER money, unless it was converted to LEA obligation, then it would have been pulling the rug. That's what is happening and is about to happen at Gildersleeve School that I'm going to explain. Our highest achieving school. Let's just finish the slides. Indicator 10, post-secondary entrance, something to be really proud of. We're putting almost 100% of students into post-secondary institutions in their first year after high school graduation. That's 9 percentage points higher than the state. That's a 7-way tie in the Shoreline Valley. That rounds up to 100. We're right there. So our kids are going on to post-secondary institutions of learning. Next slide, please. Physical fitness, something to be proud of. We have a lot to be proud of. This is something in particular I'm very proud of. So important, I'm gonna explain this, it's a little wonky. So percentage of students meeting or exceeding the health fitness zone standard in all 4 areas of the physical fitness assessment. And your index results are multiplied, think of it as penalized, like you're multiplied by penalty for less than 90% participation. So if you have more than 90% of students participating, your results stay as they are. If not, they face a multiplication penalty. They're chopped in half or they're chopped by 3/4. We have more than 90% of our students participating, so our results there, our index rate is 89.5. That's 27 percentage points higher than the state average. That's second in the Shoreline Valley Conference. So that's down to the hard work and effectiveness of our PE health teachers. Next slide, please. Arts access. So this is the percentage of high school students participating in at least one dance, theater, music, visual arts, or media arts course in the school year. You'll see our percentages have dipped in the time since COVID. I think it's also important to note we've gone from a full-time art teacher at the high school in that time to a half-time art teacher. So course offerings, students enrolling in those courses. We need to protect the arts. It's an indicator of accountability against the state average. We are 8 percentage points higher than the state average. This is a challenge. Even in the Shoreline Valley, we'd be in a 6-way tie for first, even at that data point. Next slide, please. Okay, so at the bottom of each school or district's, each school and district's next generation report card is information about achievement gaps. So next generation can prescribe a school or district to have an achievement gap if or when the size of the index performance score gap in ELA, math, or science between the high needs group of students and the non-high needs or all students group is considered a significant outlier. Significant outlier means it's at least 1 standard deviation greater than the statewide gap. So what is the average statewide gap? If you're 1 standard deviation or more outside of that, you are considered to have an achievement gap. So if you follow along in the example at the bottom, if your ELA performance index was, for your non-high needs students, was 75.2, your high needs was, trying to read that, 64.5, the size of the gap was 10.7, that gap, the Connecticut gap plus 1 standard deviation was 17, you're under that threshold, you do not have an achievement gap. The bottom row, if you look at the size of the math gap in the 4th column, would be 20 points. Connecticut's gap mean plus 1 standard deviation would be 18.2. You would have an achievement gap. Achievement gap basically means your high needs students are not keeping pace with your general student body outside of what's considered acceptable across state averages. we go to the next slide. So these are what our achievement gaps look like. For the district, we are teetering on the edge of an ELA performance gap. We're not there. The size of our gap is 16.9. The acceptable limit is 16.9. We are right there. We have a 3-year running performance gap in the area of math. We have a 3-year running performance gap in the area of science. Now we're going to talk school by school. Gildersleeve School does not qualify for science achievement gap because students take the science assessment for the first time in 3rd grade and not again until 5th. You need 2 years of consecutive years of assessment data to diagnose an achievement gap. In the 2 areas that they're assessed for achievement gap, Gildersleeve has no achievement gaps. In fact, if you look at the size of their gaps, they are well below the Connecticut State gap mean +1 standard deviation. Move up next to Biz. Biz does not have an ELA performance index gap. We're comfortably 4 points below. We do have a math performance gap for the 3rd consecutive year. We're less than a percentage point above the state gap, but still above. And we do not have a performance gap in the area of science. You can see we're almost 5 percentage points below what would get us there. Next slide. The middle school, for the past 3 years, has been running significant achievement gaps in all 3 areas. You can see the data there, well in excess of the Connecticut gap mean. The high school has been running achievement gaps, is running achievement gaps for the first consecutive year, no other years prior, in the areas of ELA and science. And again, where we're no, it's yellow because we're within a percentage. So we are right there. Next slide. Next generation schools, recognitions and designations. So I said you can be categorized 1 through 5, and you can further be given recognition as a school of distinction, a focus school, or a turnaround school. Focus and turnaround, not good designations. School of distinction, excellent designation, and for the 2nd year in a row, Gildersleeve School is a school of distinction. Gildersleeve earned School of Distinction status for the ELA growth for all students and the ELA growth of high need students and the way that they've closed achievement gaps in ELA and math. The question came up at the time we were given this news of, could Gildersleeve be a blue ribbon school? That's a determination made by the state. So the state is analyzing all schools of distinction to determine which may qualify for blue ribbon status, which is a federal recognition. We're in the running. We've not yet received news on that. We have no focus schools. We have no turnaround schools. It's important to note that we are in the 4th year of a school improvement grant funding at Gildersleeve, because based on performance 5 years ago, Gildersleeve School was designated a focus school. So kudos to Gildersleeve School. In 4 years, they've gone from a focus school to a 2-time running school of distinction. Why? Next slide. So, separate from school of distinction, focus school, turnaround school, you have school categorization based on your accountability index score. If you have an overall accountability index score between 85 and 100, meaning you've earned somewhere between 85% of your possible points and 100% of your possible points, you're category 1. Gildersleeve School is a category 1 school of distinction with 87.6%. Next is category 2. If you earn 70% of your points to 84.9% of your points, category 2. We have no schools in that category. Here's where you may be confused. You see the index scores in parentheses of Brownstone School and Portland High School, which are above 70%. Why are they not category 2 schools? If you look at the underlined information above the table, schools eligible for category 1 or category 2 status with an outlier achievement gap, a graduation gap, or a participation rate less than 95% for any state, test, or group are auto-dropped in one category. Are auto-dropped one category. What that means is Brownstone and Portland High School would be category 2 schools were it not for the achievement gaps they have. Portland Middle School, not quite there. They are firmly a category 3 school. Next slide. Okay. Trish, can you send around that worksheet and admins? You have that too.
In EdSite Secure, do you get a breakdown of subgroups within the high need students?
I'm sorry.
In EdSite Secure, do you have a breakdown of the 3 categories of high need students? And to
We
be
do.
able to
We
focus
can
in?
further break that data down, but that, for state accountability, they do not break it down.
Right.
So
And
we have access to
you
that.
taken a look in order to be able to tell like where we'd need to focus interventions, like within those 3 categories?
So with special education, we look primarily at caseloads. With ML, we consider caseload, and we also consider classification of our ML students, because there's 5 classifications of students, and the services they require aren't all the same. The kind of sticky middle is for students that don't fit special education services or ML. We're getting better at disaggregating that data. But again, it's an exercise in futility to disaggregate the data in places where you don't have pre-special education tiered supports and services available. I'm gonna talk about that next.
Okay.
I want you to kind of consider this term that I've included at the top of the table, which I've called gap specialist personnel. So there are very limited ways to close an achievement gap. Laurel, you are right. The first and best way is to make sure that kids are in your building. If they're not coming to school, your achievement gaps are only going to grow. So we have worked hard to arrest chronic absenteeism through the use of defined protocols, the development of our attendance review committee. That's a new protocol that's already paying dividends. Our attendance rates are already on the rise. It's important to note that we recognized a quirk in the high school schedule and some of the campus rules that kind of skewed our chronic absenteeism data. Students, in some cases, were beyond the threshold of minutes they were able to be absent in a day by 5 or 10 minutes, and it counted as chronic absenteeism. So we've worked to repair some of the campus, open campus policies, if you will, for upperclassmen, if I'm saying that correctly, that have helped us to reduce chronic absenteeism numbers. So we were shocked when we received our high school chronic absenteeism data. It was markedly higher than anywhere else in the district. Those students were not absent from school full days as the data would suggest. In many cases, it was just a function of they weren't here for enough minutes, and that was just due to a quirk in how our schedule works. So that, coupled with our absentee protocol, should help repair that data. Kate, am I butchering that a little bit? Not too bad. It's manageable. She can come up and address that.
What, did the kids scan a card in
Nope.
that says what minute they entered the building, or how are you calculating minutes?
So it's dependent on when a student, for a student to count as not as attending school for the day, they need to be here for a minimum of half the school day. The way our early dismissal and senior privileges were working is that students were allowed to sign out with parental permission in ways that were affecting them showing as being here for half the day. So if a student we have an hour-long lunch block in flex period that begins at 11 a.m. If a student was signing out prior to at 11 a.m., which they were missing lunch and flex and no academic periods other than what would come after lunch, they were showing as being not present for the day in terms of chronic absenteeism. Is that, am I getting that? Do you want to come up and save me? I'm a little bit out of my lane, but I know what I'm trying to say, but Kate can say it better. Yeah. Just throw something at me.
Thank you. So a couple of points I'd just like to connect for the board. Chronic absenteeism is certainly at its highest it's ever been during my tenure as the principal of the high school. Couple of things to consider as we talk about how we are accounting for it. One of the things that when we transitioned to Power School, we were counting period by period attendance, and what that was doing was the formula was any student who was absent more than 3 periods during the day was considered in Power School absent for the day. The error that we discovered in the spring was that some of those absences were really for our internal accounting processes, and that they were not, the kids were allowed to be absent. They had senior privilege, they had this, they weren't missing class time, but it was calculating as a full day. So in late June, Holly Russo and I went through almost every record by hand and corrected those. So I won't discount the high rate as saying it was just data input. Could we have missed one or two? Maybe. But we went through it with a fine-tooth comb. The state was actually very supportive and called us and said, your data looks way out of whack. You gotta go look at it. And we did. And we fixed that problem to the greatest extent you can do it by hand. Chronic absenteeism is still a problem. The other thing that I would add to Laurel's point about chronic absenteeism as it impacts academic achievement and the graduation rate is the two go hand in hand. Very often, by the time we have a student that is earned no credits in 9th grade and very few credits in 10th grade, whether COVID or just years of poor educational experiences for a million different reasons, by the time they start hitting 16 and looking beyond that their cohort graduating, there's that cliff where the idea of staying in school till you're 22 years old is no longer appealing. I think it's also important for the board to know that two factors play into our graduation rate that I would argue, if asked, shouldn't. The students that withdraw from Portland High School and go to Middletown Adult Education and receive a Middletown High School diploma count as a dropout for us. The other piece that's for the board to understand is that the students that stay and go on to our transition program and do not take their diploma count against our graduation rate. Even though they're staying for 6 years for the 18 to 22 program, they don't count as a graduate, so it impacts us. And especially when you're looking at some of these graphs that look with precipitous, and please don't misunderstand, I am not discounting them as concerns. But when your N is only 80 kids, and your 3% decrease, we're talking less than 2 people that are contributing to those shifts. So while I do consider them strongly, I also need to look at them in the context of we've had years where we've had 4 kids stay on and go into transition programming. So right there, you have a graduation rate that's going to be at a deficit. So those are just points to consider as you're looking at this data.
So Kate, I have a question. When a student is 18 and could take this is East Hampton's problem right now. There's a special ed student who didn't get a diploma when she could have graduated, stayed in the transition program, and now has argued for her case to take and be part of that graduation that would have been effective 4 years earlier. Do you know the case of the kid in East Hampton? I think there's a court case right now, but she said it makes her look like she was on a 6-year plan to graduate, and she would have to reveal that she was a special ed student and reveal some of her some of the disability that she has. So she has argued that she wanted her diploma, let's say in 2024, or 2021 or whatever it was, and should have gotten it, but went on to the transition program. So this is an issue. I don't know if the state's going to do something, but that.
Correct. So the issue is that once a student takes their diploma, they're no longer eligible for
right.
Special education services till age 22.
Right.
What I can assure the board is that all of the students that are moving on to our transition program at the end of 4 years have met the graduation requirements and participate in the graduation ceremonies and senior class activities, and receive a certificate, so that there is no anonymity is completely protected, and those students are a member of their graduating class, and then the Pathways Transition Academy is their post-secondary option. so that I can say with confidence.
Kate,
But then what does it do to the data?
It hurts the data.
Right.
It hurts the data, it
Right.
counts those students, so if we had, last year I think we had 66 kids graduate. If 3 of them went to the Transition Academy, it looks like we had 3 that didn't graduate, and it's not accurate, and it's not kind.
Kate, since the state has been amenable to you going back and hand counting who's where when, have you addressed this issue with them? Because that end should be reduced, since by and large you may know who those students are.
That's not how they do it. They calculate the 4-year graduation rate standardized across all districts. The difference, I believe, is that in the larger districts, the 2 or 3 kids that stay on
Right.
to a transition academy doesn't have a meaningful impact. The other place we sometimes see it, and some of my principal colleagues were talking about it, sometimes we will have newcomers that come to us with little to no educational record, and we place them potentially younger than their grade, than their age, so that they can get a couple of more years exposure to English language. That negatively impacts us. And so it's
Should those be data points that are separate from the overall data points?
This is the next gen. What I like about next gen is that it does standardize us across districts, across the state, but it's important to view it in the context. And even when we talk about, and I don't want to take up too much of your time, but even when we talk about like SAT scores, when you're talking about less than 100 kids, and you have 80 kids in the junior class, and I have to have 95% of them take a test, I'm begging the kid with the concussion to just like answer one question, so that and that doesn't feel good, and that's not who I am, and that's not who we are, regardless of what the reports look like.
So, Kate, can I just ask a clarifying question about the chronic absenteeism rates?
Yes.
The numbers that we're seeing here for 2023-24, sorry, is that on what's this mic? The numbers that we're seeing for 2023-24, these have been corrected or they've not been corrected?
They have been corrected. They are accurate to the best of my ability.
Okay, so but even these corrected numbers, it looks like, I mean.
They're high.
Yeah,
Yeah, they're high.
and climbing. I mean, hopefully not this coming year. Okay, thank you.
They're climbing, and like I said, when students reach a point of being disenfranchised, it's when you reach a point of trying to pull them back in, which is why we as a high school have only inclusionary practices. There are some high schools that have, and you may remember it, loss of credit. That if you've reached so many days, then no matter what you do, you can't ever earn the credit in that course. That was billed as a way to improve attendance, but for those kids that have already reached that threshold in October, you never see them again.
Right.
And it's really quite problematic as far as showing kids the door. We have to remember that our goal is to get them across the stage, and the how we do that is what's important. The other and cumulative grading goes a long way to that. The other piece of the puzzle, though, is that we don't lower our standards, because if we lower our standards, we are weakening the diploma of everyone else. Right. And we only want to award diplomas to those children whoever.
So the chronic absenteeism protocols that are kind of newly in place across the district as of this school year were sort of piloted at our elementary schools, and we saw pretty marked improvements in the data in the elementary schools. 4 months in, are you feeling like it's making a difference at the high school this year?
I am. I feel that the district attendance committee is helpful, especially offering services to parents. I also tied senior privilege to good attendance, so I think that might be poking at it in a different way. And we'll continue to brainstorm. But what we know, and I'm going to sound like I'm on a soapbox now, is that engaged, connected kids come to school, and that's the big piece. The kids that feel successful in the classroom, that understand what's going on, that have social connections, that have extracurricular connections, all of those pieces, that's truly how you fix chronic absenteeism.
So years ago, we had an EBCE program that was really devised to keep kids in school and keep them engaged. They had workplaces to go to, and they did their academics when on one or two of the days. Are you thinking about? I mean, because some of these kids really are disenfranchised, and they're not connected socially. They're not connected athletically. Do we know that there's, you know, a need for alternative programs like this again?
So what you have to be careful of with alternative programming is that you're still teaching college and career readiness. And those programs that were in existence would not meet our standards, Connecticut core standards of math and English.
Okay.
You know, every student is part of college and career readiness is getting kids to the end of Algebra 2.
Yep.
With no disrespect to the EBCE program or programs like it in districts across the state, those programs oftentimes, those kids are coming out less academically prepared, even though they have that piece of paper,
Right.
than their peers who've had access to the mainstream curriculum.
Okay. And I guess the other question I have, I know this is belabored,
I think
is
this is a
the
good
school within the
segue
school
back.
kind of thing as well. Yeah, Colchester's gonna do it,
So,
and engaging,
let me check. So,
but yeah.
before we start talking about alternative programs, I think it's important that we recognize that a complete teaching and learning system is 4 tiers, prior to anything alternative. Tier 1 is the education everyone gets. Tier 2 is the extra support a student needs to succeed in the Tier 1 classroom. Tier 3 is a separate curriculum to remediate learning gaps that are profound but not influenced by disability. And Tier 4 is special education. So until we can ensure that we have all 4 tiers in place and personnel equipped to deliver instruction at all 4 tiers, then we shouldn't be offering alternatives. The job is to get students across the stage through a comprehensive system of teaching and learning that's traditional. And when it doesn't succeed, then you have alternative options available for kids. I want to get back to this table for a minute. Go ahead, Sarah.
I think I'm just still struggling to understand why it wouldn't be helpful to disaggregate data to understand, like, hey, you've
We
got
do
students
disaggregate
who are
data. It's just
receiving
not how
tier
we're
4.
presenting it here.
Yeah, right. But if you can understand that students who are receiving tier 4 supports are not the students by and large that are leading to these large gaps, then we would know where to target those services towards students receiving free and reduced lunch or students who are multi-language learners.
But knowing where to target services in the absence of having people to deliver those services. Like, we can talk about defining the budgetary need. The point is, there is a budgetary need. We want to talk about how much. The much is more than nothing.
But I think
Right now, it's nothing.
Right, but in the absence of disaggregating data, we don't even know the specific
So what I
need.
can tell you definitively is that that high needs data is not being weighed down by special education students.
I think that's helpful. That's what I'm asking.
I mean, is it being affected? Absolutely, but those special education students are still expected to be able to perform unless they're being administered alternate assessments to the level of performance of their peers. That's still an achievement gap. So even if it's being weighed down, and I'm not putting that on students, pulled down, brought down, however.
Disproportionately
represented by special education students, then the idea would be, then we need more special education centers. Right, that maybe our caseloads are too big. Or the quality of our services that we're providing aren't allowing these students to succeed as they ought to be. But if we look at the table, it's not a mystery of how you repair an achievement gap. And it hasn't been a mystery in Portland. So there are certain positions which I've termed here, and this is not an official term, gap specialist positions. A tier 1 classroom teacher is not a specialist at closing an achievement gap. They develop a universal curriculum, and their expertise goes just below tier 1. They can provide some tier 2 support, which means a little bit of extra help accessing and succeeding within the tier 2 curriculum. Then we get into the role of an interventionist. who develops and delivers more intensive Tier 2 supports in alignment to the Tier 1 curriculum, or delivers an alternative Tier 3 curriculum that remediates skill gaps that students need to have remediated so that they can access the Tier 1 curriculum. This is all before special education. We know in Portland our special education prevalence rates are high, and those rates, those high rates, create a lot of budgetary expense. So maybe we save money in the long run in special education services by strengthening our pre-special education tiered supports and services. But let's see if that works. It's, like I said, it's not a guessing game. It hasn't been a guessing game in Portland. So the table you have in front of you speaks to our accountability data from last year and the gap specialist personnel we had employed in each building. So at Valley View, which again was not given a categorization because they're only held accountable to chronic absenteeism data, we had 219 students. We had 1 special education teacher. We had 1 literacy interventionist. We have no math intervention. No math interventionist available to students with the exception of a part-time tutor who actually delivers more literacy assistance than math assistance. Across the board in our district, we have no instructional coaches. The role of an instructional coach is to assist teachers in the development of differentiated instruction at the Tier 1 level. That cannot be done through teacher evaluation. A coach and an evaluator are not the same. Gap specialist positions that are listed here are industry standard positions. So I would encourage the district to look across the Shoreline Valley and where we see ourselves in 9th place and 10th place and 8th place and 7th place against those districts. Go out to a Haddam-Killingworth or go out to Valley Regional and ask, how many interventionists do they have? What are their ratios of special education teachers to their general education population? Do they have instructional coaches at their elementary level? You'll find there's more yeses than nos, and that those ratios are much smaller than what we have in Portland. If we look at Gildersleeve, 251 students. Last year, there were 3 special education teachers. That position, that's now being cut to 2. There were 2 literacy interventionists, which with the resignation of 1, that has now been cut to 1. There is 1 math interventionist, there is no instructional coaches. And you see that total number of gap specialist positions last year was 6. It was 6 the year before. How did they get 6? Because if you look at the bottom, they were deemed a focus school and received $847,000 in 4-year state grant funding. Money that was put to incredibly effective use by talented leadership and within the teaching and learning system of that school. What's their reward for becoming a school of distinction? That money is disappearing and those positions are being cut. If we look at Brownstone, 212 students, 2 special education teachers, 1 literacy interventionist, 1 math interventionist, 4 total gap specialists. What's the consequence at Brownstone? For the first time, we see an achievement gap surface. We have fewer gap specialists and we have 1 achievement gap. The middle school, 213 students, 3.5 gap specialists. That number this year is actually 3.33. We have a 0.33 math interventionist. 3 consecutive years of achievement gaps. At the high school, it becomes even bleaker. We actually have, that's a typo, last year there were 2 special education, general student body special education. There were 3. It's being cut to 2. You see the performance concerns that is in the proposed budget going to be cut to 2. 0 interventionists. And in the district for 49 MLs, we have 1 ML teacher, a 49 to 1 caseload.
Nuts.
We wouldn't dream of that in special education. So I'm up here advocating for tiered systems of support for students. You're right. The first charge is to make sure they're in the building. But if you think about disenfranchised students who come to our schools with significant achievement gaps and struggle in their classes, and we're unable to provide them targeted supports and services that help them to actually experience success and get better in their skills so that they can be more successful in their Tier 1 classrooms, then their motivation to come to school gets less and less and less. And this is a problem that begins in 5th grade. and soon to be even earlier as we start to diminish these positions in Gildersleeve. To stand up here and kind of pound the podium for more positions, I know it's more money. But these are the standards of academic achievement. And the district needs to take a look at the system of teaching and learning and make sure that that system is complete, and that it's complete before special education. And a disability is a disability. Intervention doesn't cure a disability, but it creates the potential for arresting low academic performance in the pre-referral process. Or it limits the amount of services that you need to provide students as special education mandate because they're accounted for in tiers 1, 2, and 3. We are operating below achievement standards, especially in the area of gap specialist personnel, and until that situation is rectified, can you go back one slide? Can you go back to the categorization slide on the presentation? Right there. The reality is this. Even with the low chronic absenteeism rate at the high school, they are good enough to be a Category 2 school. Were we to close the achievement gap, we might be talking about Portland High School as a school of distinction. But because they have an achievement gap, they will automatically be knocked down at least one category in perpetuity. You can't will your way to closing an achievement gap. There's no protocol that's going to close an achievement gap, like a protocol can really work to stifle chronic absenteeism. Gildersleeve has managed to do it incredibly well. Incredible leadership, given money, which bought people, which strengthened their system of teaching and learning, was put to incredibly effective use. It's important to say it wasn't just the money. It was the money, the resources, coupled with good leadership and actualizing it. We have incredible leadership in the district. We need to give them the tools necessary to close the achievement gap. If it's the will of the town, and if we can do that, our index rates will improve, our standing will improve, and we can go from being a good district to a better district and perhaps a great one.
Questions for Eric?
No, thank you. I'm sorry you're leaving.
Thank you.
I
Really
do.
is
Eric, I think there
Eric,
would be
I
a
do have a
question.
question actually. And Kate, maybe this is also for you. Going to, this is in the supplemental, I'm curious about the increasing change. And maybe Eric, this is just going back to what you said before, but the significantly increased change of next gen accountability index results for high need students in ELA, in math, and science. And if it's just exactly what you've already just said, you can just say that. But I'm curious if you have any more.
Well, I will
color
say,
on that.
our ML population has increased dramatically at the high school. ML supervision came under my wing. Our one ML teacher is meeting a range of student abilities in the ML classroom. There's 10 or 12 students in the classroom at a time. These are supposed to be small group delivered services. Those are not small groups. Our special education caseloads have increased across the district and at the high school. So I think it all plays in. I don't know any other way to say it than it's a staffing. It starts with staffing. It starts with getting kids to school. And then when we're here to make sure that we have the appropriate staffing to deliver targeted supports and services in small group settings. And we don't have it.
Any additional questions?
Do you think current teachers who are misdirected or directed at doing other activities outside of academics could be refocused in to helping with some of these achievement gaps?
An interventionist is a master teacher. It's not a recycled classroom teacher. And our teachers have full schedules. You know, listen, you could walk around this high school and step into some classrooms and see classes with 12 kids. There's a challenge. If you're going to be a comprehensive high school that maintains a competitive program of studies, you can't make sure that every class has 25 kids in it because you've just axed half of your course offerings.
Right.
So what I would encourage the district to do, I think Dave, you asked the question, what was different in 2018-19? What was our staffing profile in 2018? What is it now? You know, that may be one way to look at it. And the world hasn't stood still since 2018-19. I think we have to acknowledge, as Dr. Britton explained last year when we did our achievement presentation, the profound impact of COVID in creating and exacerbating achievement gaps has been profound. Our response to that has not been to increase tiered supports and services. Whether it was through ESSER money or not, it ultimately would have fallen as an LEA obligation. It has to become an obligation. You know, from a budgetary standpoint, I would say this if I was leaving, I would say it if I was staying. The district needs one hard year of a large increase. And I know that's very difficult to swallow, but an increase that puts these positions into the budget and keeps them there. And until you do that, you do not have the personnel necessary to close achievement gaps. You just don't have it. And there's no brilliant leader or collaborative strategy that's going to do it. It takes people. People cost money. We only have to look as far as Gildersleeve to see that we made it work. Gildersleeve this year, where we've had some cuts in positions, it's already suffering. You know, meeting that standard of a school of distinction becomes harder, if not impossible.
I mean, the point you brought up, I'd like to see this chart from other schools so we can get an idea, because nobody else has massive budgets with all these extra people. I'd like to see, we should be finding out how they're doing it or what they're doing to maybe we need to do something different. My other point is, and I'm talking from not knowing anything, but I know we have 500 or 600 of our students on special IEPs or whatever, or that's half our population. Maybe, and I'm just saying this out of the box, maybe we need to raise the standards of the teaching because we're trying to have regular teachers and then we're trying to hire a second faculty to teach those ones that need help. Maybe we need to make this all-encompassing higher degree of teaching, for lack of a better word, you know what I'm saying? Because we're not going to afford a second level of teacher for everybody that needs special ed. We're not going to, or special help.
What I would say, we have really good teachers. I mean, for what Ian did, for what Portland pays, we have really good teachers.
We do.
We have really good teachers, despite what Portland pays, if I'm going to be honest, okay?
Yeah.
Not for what Portland pays. We have really good teachers, bar none. Good teachers leave when their heads are turned by other opportunities or more well-resourced districts. I think the difference between other district staffing profiles or huge budgets or huge increases is they've had these positions in their budget. They've had instructional coaches, they've had interventionists, so they don't need a tsunami budget year of adding in what they're deficient in having. And I'm not saying Portland needs to do it all in a year. You can't do it in a year. But it needs to be a strategic commitment to increasing, as I've termed it here, gap specialist personnel over several years.
So I'm going to ask the question. The grade configuration that we talk about with facility changes, what you've said tonight to us, it seems like it goes hand in hand with the question of how we move forward as a district to consolidate the schools to provide for those people that we're not able to hire right now.
Well,
and I think
Sarah, what's our prevalence rate in the district? 21%. So 100 kids in a grade, 21 are special education. SRBI tells us of students that are not special education, remaining students, so the remaining 80, 20% will need tiered supports, not including tier 4. 20%. So you're talking about an additional 15 kids a grade. How are those 15 students being served? It's beyond the ability of our teachers to meet with that number of, I'll meet with you after school, I'll meet with you during recess. It's not possible to meet those needs through differentiation. But what ends up happening is you end up with a rate like 21% because you don't have pre-referral services. Again, Disability is a disability. Intervention doesn't cure disability, but it does influence your prevalence rate. And so what the district may find is that over time, by investing in intervention, investing in pre-referral supports and services, you actually reduce your prevalence rate.
So in your perfect view, how many more additional gap specialists would the district need?
In a perfect world, there would be a literacy and math interventionist available at every grade level. Every grade level. Just like there would be a grade level general special education, not serving special programs. A general special education teacher at every grade level. That's ideal. That should at least be the case through grade 6. Then maybe you can start to talk about an interventionist for every grade and a half of students once you've started to close achievement gaps. But in the short term, you need more because you've had nothing. Then you can start to pull back and see what happens. But at the high school where you've had nothing, it's not going to help to, in the short term, to bolster intervention at our elementary schools. They need tiered supports and services now. Now, if we do that work and strengthen our tiered systems of support leading up to the high school, then maybe over time we say, you know what, we're not needing as much intervention at the high school as we once did because we're taking in kids with less learning gaps than others. There's not as intense or as high of a need for intervention services because we've rectified it earlier. But at first, you know, you're bleeding everywhere.
Does the district need to hire like a strategic planner to help us get there? Or is that the role of the curriculum? You know, should we have, can you do it in the next 2 weeks? Come up with like.
If only we have the budget to support that.
I had the career fortune of working in a few different districts. The talent and abilities of this leadership team to think strategically and to actualize resources to good effect, bar none, like second to none. But they need the resources. You know, it can't be blood from a stone. You know, and they're not, I don't think they're asking for more than they need. Again, we're asking for the standard. You know, and where we're less than standard is where we're seeing achievement gaps pop up. First at Brownstone, we're less than standard, get worse at the middle school, and become profound at the high school. And when we're worried about graduation rates, disenfranchised students don't come to school for a number of reasons. They don't feel successful here. Well, one of the ways you can help students to feel successful, yes, for engaging lessons and good relationships with teachers, but also by helping them to be successful in their academic classes.
All right. Thank you very much, Eric.
Thank you.
Given us a lot to think about. All right. I'm going to keep us moving because I'm mindful of the time and looking at a lot of business that we still need to get through.
Told you it was gonna be a long one.
It is going to
I'm
be a long
sorry.
one. I know.
I don't know.
Here we go.
I don't know how to shorten these up.
Some of this we should be able to move through fairly quickly. So under new business, the first item is approval of the Middlesex Hospital Vocal Cords Building Usage Application. Charles, do you just want to, we've done this with this organization
Yeah, we've done this
before
for
many
several times before. I did include the motion,
Yep.
so I'm not sure if you want to take a look at it. Yeah, this is
We need an explanation. Does anybody need an explanation?
Yeah.
I make a motion that we allow the Middlesex Hospital vocal cords to utilize our facility here for the concert that they're going to put on in a couple of
May
weeks.
2nd.
Yes, there it is right there.
Thank you, Meg, and seconded by Angela. Is there
Oh, I was saying the date is May 2nd.
Oh, I
Isn't
thought
that
you
what
said
it is?
second.
I was looking for a date.
Apologies.
I thought you were looking for the date,
I
and
was
it's May
I was
2nd.
reading all the, yeah, okay.
But I will second it.
Seconded by Angela. Is there any discussion, questions? We've had a good working relationship with them in the past.
Everybody? Yep.
Excellent.
Mr. Tucker is
Any-
the director.
Any comment? No, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. The next item is the 2025-2026 school district calendar. This is a first reading. I noticed
First
you
reading.
have 3 drafts.
Hold on.
And
So
come
this
on, you
is-
really threw me for a loop with
Yes.
those.
So
Charles.
so what I would suggest is only look at the first one. The one what I had done, and
Option A.
it landed like a lead balloon. Okay, I'll just be honest, right? These reflected some earlier thinking I had, where I was engaging the leadership team and the teachers in a discussion about how we might possibly claw back some time for a February vacation. Nobody's interested in that.
Really?
I was a little surprised too, Meg. Sometimes I think my brilliant ideas are brilliant, and then I talk to other people about them, and they're like, "No, Charles, not brilliant. We don't think that we want to do it." Long story. So, ignore the other two. I'm not recommending them. It's only the one that
This is option A at the
is
top?
option A.
Okay.
The other, and I just said when I made the decision not to even recommend the others, I forgot to tell Tricia to pull those out. So just look at option A.
Okay.
And that lines up exactly with the Learn Regional calendar and will be pretty consistent with what we're doing this year.
Great.
So-
Did we check I mean, I know you said with Learn, but did we kind of consult with anybody else about that April vacation week? I know we've run into.
Yep, it's all consistent, right?
Okay.
It's all, it's where Learn is and it's consistent with this year.
Okay.
Yeah. So as first read, just take a look at it, but we'll loop back. Otherwise, if you have questions tonight, I can answer them, or email me the questions or bring them to the 21st, when hopefully we'll have a shorter meeting.
And there's really nothing that I noticed that was a significant change from this current calendar year. Is that accurate?
Correct.
With option A?
Correct.
Okay.
I am glad to see January 2nd off because
I am too.
that
I
would
heard
be
a lot
well
of
received.
complaints. Yeah.
Yeah, that works out.
Any questions about this? We'll take it as a first read, so we'll plan to take action on it at our second meeting in January.
Yep.
If you have questions, reach out to Charles. All right.
All right. Keep going.
This next item is a proposal to increase health at the Portland High School by 1 section. It's 0.15 FTE, and Personnel Committee met to discuss this, and there was consensus at the personnel meeting that this was something we wanted to recommend for full consideration by the board.
Right.
So Charles can give a brief overview.
Right. So our current health PE, our health teacher we reduced to 0.5. If you remember last year, we had to make some difficult decisions. We did that. The class sizes have just gotten too large. I'm just going to lay it right out there. We need to add back the section so we can run an additional section of health this coming semester. Spoke with Kate. She supports it 100%. I do too. You will notice in next year's budget, my recommendation is to bring the health position up to 0.8, which reflects our needs. So, and health, of course, is one of those subjects that you talk about very important things there. You can't have class sizes of 25 students.
Well,
You
and to-
need reasonable class sizes. And this teacher's worked very hard, and there are lots of challenges with respect to last year's budget season. This won't cost us a ton of money. It will help us stabilize this program, and I think we really need to do it.
And to clarify too, that it's not just class sizes, it's not just the health class sizes that are impacted. In order to meet health class needs, we've been pulling a middle school PE teacher
Right.
to teach a health section, and the result of that is that our middle school PE classes have climbed to 28 and 29 students, and that's posing a safety concern.
Right.
So that was part of the conversation too.
Part
that
of
our-
it, but the bigger
yes.
issue is the health class sizes at the high school and the need to bring this person back up for the one section for the second semester. And then again, with hopes that we can increase the section from 0.5 to 0.8, which reflects our class sizes and needs for health instruction at the high school next year.
I make a motion that we increase the health and physical education staffing at Portland High School to a 0.1
Yeah.
FTE.
Right.
0.15.
Yeah, it's 0.1. It is 0.1. Yeah.
It says 0.1 on.
Just leave it on that, Meg.
Yeah.
Trust me, you're
Okay.
fine. Yep.
All right.
Yep.
Sarah?
Seconded by Sarah, thank you. I'm sorry, now I'm confused by
Yeah,
that. but
I'll
it's
fill you
all
in.
good.
I'll fill
Okay,
you in.
it's
It's all
one
good.
section, as long
It's
as
all
it's one
good.
additional
Whiteboard.
section.
It's all good. I got to give you a whole whiteboard
Okay.
section to explain how high
Fine.
school sections work with semester courses, and
Okay, as long as we're getting the
we're
section that
good.
we
Yes,
need.
we're getting the section that we need.
Great,
Yes.
thank you. Is there more
So is there a
discussion?
cost associated
Yes.
with that?
That's a good question,
What is
actually.
the cost?
$7,500.
Any other questions, comments, discussion?
But we're already anticipating a 10,000.
That was, it's factored into the $11,000 deficit.
So
That's in
it's
there.
not raised another 7, it's.
And I think I put a placeholder of 11,000, so if it's going on to 7, then that takes the deficit down 3,000.
Okay.
So if we didn't approve this, we'd be at 3?
No, that's.
Yeah, she's right. We'd be at 3.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, we'd be at 0, probably, because I have
We'd be
it,
at
if
0?
we're 11,000,
Yeah.
I have 11,400 in there. We'd be at positive 400.
I'm guessing you have some ideas of how to manage that elsewhere in the budget, and that this continues to be a priority.
Yes.
Yeah. Other questions, concerns? No, motion's been made and seconded. All in favor? Aye.
Thank you.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion passes unanimously. The next item is a new policy. This is a Board of Ed Policy 6148, and it's a policy about FAFSA completion. And this is just a first reading. We're not taking action tonight. This was considered by the policy committee and sent forward for a first read with consensus from the policy committee. This is cleanup based on the
Cleanup.
mandated language,
Yes.
and the recommendation was a rip and replace of our current policy with the update from CABE.
Right, and
Do you wanna give any
it's
more?
just that the old policy was by the class of 2025, Kate, correct me if I'm wrong, had to complete the FAFSA. They changed the legislation and pushed that forward to the class of 2027. So by the time the class of 2027 starts, they'll be required to complete the FAFSA form.
Right, and it's the legislation.
It's the legislation,
It's the
right.
law. Yeah.
So it's just first read.
Yeah.
Yep.
Questions about this?
Is there a way to see what the changes were? Is there a copy in the? I'm
Oh,
only
did
seeing
we,
what you
that's the
read.
CABE policy, is not that, is the board policy, the current one not in there?
Is it in the
It's in the
drive?
drive.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
It's the exact same, it's mostly just that change of 2025 to 2027.
Oh, that's literally the change?
That's it.
That's literally the
Oh.
change, yeah.
Okay,
Just
Easy,
the
that
2
one's
years,
easy.
yeah.
thanks.
Wish they were all that easy.
Yeah. Yeah, okay. I think the reason we recommended I'm trying to remember now, the reason we recommended a rip and replace is that there was some, the language is a little bit different. This language is cleaner,
Yeah.
that's all. But the content doesn't really change, but the policy itself is a cleaner version.
Right, and if anybody wants a primer on what FAFSA is, the financial aid forms, and it helps, Kate can come back and explain that in greater detail. But it's essentially the federal financial aid form, and, the goal is, it's not an indicator yet, but it may be someday, how many students complete the FAFSA form there's an emphasis on making sure that students are accessing those funds for post-secondary. So.
Yeah. So we will consider that policy for a second read and taking action at our second January meeting. We'll move on to item E, which is approval of the Project Oceanology 2025-26 Interdistrict Grant Program application.
Good, and Mike is here, awesome program, we've done it for, how many, what is it, almost 8-9 years now, right, Mike?
Yeah, a little pause during COVID, obviously.
Right.
Came back in 21.
The kids
Right.
love it.
Kids love it. It's great. Interdistrict program. Get them out on the sound, doing all kinds of neat things. 100% support this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, Mike, I have a quick question. It used to be that there was enough grant funding available that the entire sixth grade could participate, and then my memory is 2 years ago or a year ago that changed, and a smaller portion of the sixth grade class gets to participate. Is that still the case? Is
It
there a
is.
chance that the grant funding will expand?
As of now, no, because that was amazing to actually be able to bring the
Yeah.
entire sixth grade. So what it's come down to is they allot us 25 spots. And we kind of partner with another school in Hartford
Mhm.
and then another school in Cromwell. They each have 25 spots, and we open it up to certain students who basically have to do kind of like an application process. So it's still pretty amazing for those students, obviously, and our teachers take it on. They love doing it as well. And fortunately, in Portland, we have pretty great parents who can come and, volunteer to chaperone on that too. So we'd love to be able to take 110 students, but the fact we get to take 25 is pretty cool.
It's still a pretty special experience. All right, thank you.
Yep.
Are there any other questions for Mike? No.
So this is not costing us anything?
It doesn't cost us anything. It's
Okay.
funded by a grant from through the state, correct?
Yeah.
So this, we would be approving your request to the grant,
Basically,
or?
approving our participation in it next year. So
So we've already received the grant?
yes, they award us with the money to do this every year as long as we want to continue to do it.
Okay.
And then basically what happens is we go on, I would say, 4 or 5 out-of-district field trips. I drew the short straw and I had to go
During
on a boat
class
in
time
February.
or after class time?
No, this is during class time.
During
So
class
it's about, it
time.
ends up averaging like once a month. And then, we have an in-house one where we get to dissect squids and stink up our school for a little bit. And then we have an in-house one at one of our partner schools as well. As well as last year was the first year that we had a family engagement night, which we are doing again. It's just we're gonna do it at a partner school.
Sounds like fun.
And you said the kids have to apply for it, and is their academic achievement factored into that?
Not
or
necessarily,
what
but
necessarily is the
it's
criteria?
it's a whole team approach in terms of myself and the 6th grade team and the 6th grade case manager too. So we look at anybody who wants to be a part of it, and yes, we do look at, are they completing their work in and out of school? Are they responsible in school? Are they, getting written up for behaviors? Are they committed to making up the work that they miss the day that they're out? And then we end up choosing based on that.
Okay. Because I just see that the goal number 1 references reduced racial, ethnic, and economic isolation. And I was just, can you just give me a little bit of information on how the program, and I don't know, I'm gonna take up a lot of time, so maybe I should talk to
No,
about
ask
this.
the question.
How does the program help to bridge that type of, or how does it reach that goal?
Well, I
Because
think-
I thought, when I first read it, and it said Project Oceanology, I actually thought that it was odd to have that as the first goal. And then the second part goes on to increase academic achievement. So do you really put the emphasis on reducing the racial, ethnic, and economic isolation?
Yeah,
or-
and that's not just Project O. That's more of a brownstone approach. We're not just going to take one mold of a 6th grade student and pick 25 of them. We try to diversify as much as we can.
Yeah, but
This language
yes.
this language is coming from the organization that
Yeah.
funds
Right.
the program in general. And one of their goals is reducing racial, ethnic, and economic isolation. And how they achieve that is the partnership that Mike described earlier, where Portland students participate with partner students from a Hartford school and from Cromwell, and these
So they're
kids
actually
go on trips together.
They're actually
Okay.
together on the boat, in the museum, in each other's schools throughout the year.
So it's
Okay.
part of how it's like part of the grant mechanism, it's part of how they're funding this, and the experience that kids are having is access to these like really pretty unique experiences where they're on a boat, or they're by the seashore, or they're, learning about little critters, and then the critters come visit the school, the family night, and they're handling hermit crabs. It's a pretty unique experience.
It is. It's been very popular.
I just wasn't sure how they assess whether they're meeting this goal, or is it just the act of
How
getting
Project
different
O
groups?
assesses that, I'm not sure. I mean, I
Okay.
think their approach to it is a step in the right direction, obviously, but
Yep.
I'm not sure if they have a number that, quantifies if they're meeting that goal or not.
Okay, all right, wasn't sure. Thank you.
Yeah. Any
Yeah.
other questions? All right.
I'll make a motion.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mike.
I'll make a
Thank you.
motion to approve the Project Oceanology, thank you, inter-district grant program application.
Seconded by Kim. Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Motion passes unanimously. We're going to move on to item F. We are going to, this is the approval of a 1.0 FTE paraprofessional.
I'm pulling that.
And Charles is going to explain why we're not moving forward with this
We're not going to
recommendation.
move forward with that now because of the deficit. Stephanie's projection for the 11,000 deficit included what we just did with health, but I can't add to that right now. So we're going to certainly keep this in the front of our mind. Hopefully I can come back to you on January 21st. Things change that quick. But until and unless I identify the potential ability to fund that without adding to the deficit, I can't bring it to you. I can't recommend it at this point.
How much would it have been?
10,000?
I mean, how many days left of school are there?
90, 95.
90.
Math, probably
Half,
15,
yeah.
probably half, a little more than half of their salary,
Yeah.
so 25 divided by 2.
Like 12 to
Yeah.
14,000.
Yeah, 12 to 14, give or take.
Can you speak to where the need is?
Yeah.
So the need is for a one-to-one paraprofessional for a student. We are going to staff it. We're just going to staff it with an in-house paraprofessional that is currently our only non-special education paraprofessional. It's going to be very upsetting for this person and for us because it's going to disrupt, like Eric talks about, our regular education programming. But obviously the IEP-based needs of the students we have to fill, we will fill it. We'll just reallocate our one non-special education para.
But it's important for us to think, I mean, and Charles and I spoke about this earlier, it's important to think about the impacts that has, not just because, as you said, we meet the needs of the IEPs, but the impact that that's going to have on the middle school library and our students' ability to access the library, because that's where that person is usually staffed.
We did this last year too when we were
Yeah.
there.
So again, this is the impact, the layers of impact that need to be communicated to our representatives at the state so that they have a real picture. You know, we're not just talking about 7 percentage points.
That's
We're
right.
talking about, you know, a whole lot of ways in which our kids are being impacted by that.
That's the story we want to
That's
tell.
the story to tell, but it's unfortunate. And I hope, like, I'm not giving up. You know, we're gonna keep looking under every seat cushion, and if we get to a point where we can afford it, I'll bring it back to you. But my commitment is that I'm not going to create a deficit by adding new positions. Right now, we added the kindergarten teacher, we added paraprofessionals. We were prepared to do this when before yesterday's email we were projecting $100,000 surplus. But this is how fast things change, and it's just lousy.
So, are there questions about that? There is no recommended action. All right, that is on hold.
Recommend a table.
Item G is additional fiscal year 2024
Yeah,
fourth
we missed
quarter
a couple.
transfers. So Stephanie, will you talk us through this?
Yeah, so, as the town was preparing for the audit, one of the funds, Tom, was analyzing and saw because the town gets paid weekly, so you can tell when there's something off. And as when he was analyzing one of his accounts, he saw something, and after researching about it, some of the FICA taxes that are on 4 of our grant funded positions were coded wrong, and they were being taken out of the town budget instead of our budget. So it technically, he was able to correct for this year, so we should be good for this year, but it was $8,551.50 for last year, and thankfully we had about $17,000 left over, so it works in our it's fine, but to the whole purpose of we can't have a negative in our
Final one.
in our location that made us negative by adding that expense in. So I'm suggesting increasing the FICA Medicare line to 22000 and decreasing, I picked the one account so the objects match the 61011. I just picked different supply lines that had some surplus in it to offset that difference, and it has been corrected, and that's the hard thing, you coded one wrong number and payroll goes to something different. And thankfully, luckily he saw it when in the bi-weekly where we get paid every 2 weeks, it was higher than what it normally was, and that's the only way he caught it.
That's the way you tell it. No, that's good.
Are these?
How is this gonna impact the supplies that you're taking out?
This is from last year.
Oh,
This is from last year, so remember
Okay.
I don't know if it was in the December
Yep,
board
I do
meeting,
remember
I
now.
did the big
Very
one.
good. Yep.
So this is in addition to that.
Okay.
We missed this
Thank
one.
you. Very good.
But this is last year's budget.
Yeah.
So I make a motion that we make this final transfer to get our books in order.
Mhm.
Do that
It's
language
right
then.
here. The Board of Ed hereby approves the below fiscal year 2023, 2024 additional year and general transfers. The budget account 01-107-252-22-000. It's a FICA Medicare account for $8,551.50. These were additional FICA charges, and that transfer is in that amount. It will decrease the following line items: 01-104-100-61-011, general supplies, 35-21-10, 01-0105-22, 220-61-011, general supplies, $1,000, 01-106-108-61-011, general supplies, $3,127, and 01-106-114-61-011, general supplies, $303.40. The budget transfer decrease is $8,551.50, so that balances the books.
Thank you, Meg. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Kim. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, motion passes unanimously. The next two items, the wage adjustment for substitute teachers and the administrator's memorandum of agreement for the vision writer, will be discussed in executive session, and then we would take any action after executive session. So we're going to move to old business, and the first item under old business is the Yale Child Study Research.
Quick reminder.
Yes.
So quick reminder, last meeting you had the researchers come. Part of our board policy requires that the board approve research, and that was the presentation that you received with the Yale Child Study, trying to expand the ruler program up into the high school, and Kate and the researchers explained everything. The only thing I'll add to that is we did consult with our board attorney, and per our current bylaws and policies, we would require parents to sign a permission slip to opt in. The question was whether we would say to parents, let us know if you don't want to participate, otherwise we're going to include your children in it. Now it's going to be the other way. We're going to need a signed paper from every parent, and if the parents don't provide that signed paperwork, we will exclude the students from the study. So that was the last piece. That is what we're going to do. So the ask tonight is that you take a position on whether you're comfortable approving the study.
Can I ask a couple additional questions?
Mm-hmm.
So when a parent doesn't now you're not opting out, you're opting in, but if you don't return it and you're opted out, are you opted, because the opt-out form, I wasn't clear on whether it was just opting out of the survey, or is it opting out of sending the child's data
Yes.
so is it both, or is it just the survey?
The data will not be
We will not
shared.
provide the data.
Yeah.
So if a parent does not return this permission slip, their child's data will not go to Yale and their cohorts?
Correct. You must
Okay.
affirmatively opt in.
Okay.
And that certainly makes it more complicated for the high school and the researchers to collect permission slips back. But if we do not collect a permission slip back, we're assuming that parent is not allowing their children to participate in the study.
I know, recall we did have that conversation with Julie about whether there are districts that, whether you can participate as an opt-in district, and they are comfortable with that. They've worked with districts who have, it will be a little more challenging to collect the permission slips, but our district would still be eligible to participate in the study.
Have we investigated looking at other SEL programs where we don't have to send our children's data to an outside vendor, and what those costs might be?
So
I just worry. I know we send our kids' data now to the state, and they have very strong protocols on security. I don't know if we talked to the attorney about that as well. Are there any type of FERPA violations that we could potentially open ourselves up to, sending the child's records to a third party that could potentially receive a data breach?
There's
So
going to be
the-
no identifying.
There will be no identifying
Well, with the
information.
survey, it does say
but-
the child puts their SACID in, their student identification into the survey before they start it.
And with the way Julie explained it, they will use numbers.
Their SACIDs.
Our district has the code. The researchers receiving the information won't have the key to be able to figure out which identification number belongs to which individual. So data should be protected. But more to the point of your question, we did have a conversation with Rebecca
Yep.
about that, because there are very high standards when you're participating in research that involves students. And correct me if I don't nail it, but the higher standards are particularly important when it comes to very sensitive data that's being shared. None of the data that's being asked for as part of the survey questions or the data that's being shared is of a sensitive enough nature that we would be at any kind of risk.
No.
Is that accurate?
Yeah, okay, maybe if you want to explain this too, but the answer is SACID IDs, which could, like, if you had the key to link up with the student,
Yeah.
identify the student, they won't get that. They're going to get the data they need stripped of any of their, okay, correct me if I'm wrong, they won't have any ability to say Charles Britton's attendance and survey results are here. There's no opportunity for the Yale researchers to see that. We can, we would be able to, like Kate Lawson and the counselors would be able to, but we will handle that record like a confidential record, not release that to anybody but the parents or the students when they turn 18, or anybody the parent tells us they can give it to, but the Yale researchers won't get that.
Correct.
It completely blind. They'll get the survey results and the attendance data, but they will have no ability to say, even if it's a male or female, what grade level. We strip out any biographical or identifiable information from that.
So just remind me, Kate, if we do this research, if we're in the program and we get the program now or we get it later, if a parent opts the child out and doesn't want them to participate, that means they can't be exposed to the information or to the curriculum.
No.
Everyone, so as I spoke about at the last meeting, SEL curriculum is mandated by state law.
It is.
So the program that we're using now, no one is in love with.
Right.
And we would like to change our SEL program to ruler, to see, and we have an opportunity to do that with additional support from Yale and the cohort of high schools that I mentioned,
Right.
and the financial savings.
Right.
So those students that don't opt in will still get the curriculum. They just won't have their information shared with the study.
You don't have to take.
Correct.
Right, and I'm presuming the study that when I talk to the researchers about this, they're gonna, before they give us this whole, they're gonna look for I think, a minimum opt-in.
Right.
I would, but I think they're very eager to work with us, and they're very eager to draw a cohort in Connecticut, and I would welcome the opportunity to partner with Yale in this work.
And if we don't get the program, then we're 2 years into keeping the program that we're using that nobody loves.
Correct.
Have we looked at other SEL programs and what the costs are, just out of curiosity? How much are we really saving besides?
So we paid for School Connect, and I need you to forgive my memory with how long ago. I believe it was 2 years ago, with an SBDI grant, which is the School-Based Diversionary Institute. We did not pay for it out of the local budget. We had received that grant in large part to the work that Eric had done with that foundation. The goals of that grant were to reduce suspensions out of school, to reduce arrests, and to reduce the number of 911 calls in favor of calls to 211, which is Child Emergency Psychiatric Services.
Yep.
So we applied for that grant, got it, and used that money to purchase School Connect. At the time, that was the program that the the mental health team had determined might be the most effective. I'll be very candid with you, there's not a whole lot out there for 9 through 12 as far as curriculums that really engage kids.
Okay.
Which is why I'd like to try Ruler.
But we're comfortable sending our children's data to these Yale and their cohort, because I think it's AIR, for the next, till 2029, correct? Would we have any way of backing out if we, if some sort of data breach did occur?
Yeah, I think you can always drop out of a research study.
You can?
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
Okay.
I think I have a high degree of confidence. Yale has an incredibly rigorous vetting of their research. They're a research institution.
Okay.
And to what Dr. Britton's point was, I really don't see them looking at data that's highly sensitive. They're gonna look at the number of detentions, the number of suspensions, the number of absentee data, the students' responses to the survey. Those questions are all questions that have been vetted as appropriate to give to kids. I would never put our kids at risk.
Okay, just AIR does also play a large role in it. Two things. So we use Second Step K-8. They have a high school curriculum. It's not a program we're interested in. That would cost for a one-year license somewhere to the tune of $3,000 for a site license. And that really would be like Second Step and Ruler are the gold standard for high school SEL curricula that are available. School Connect was a cheap try-it option. It didn't pan out. It was relatively low stakes because we were using grant money. AIR plays a significant role in the yearly administration and data warehousing for our Smarter Balanced assessment. So this is not like a fly-by-night research company. And we already, through state contracts with Smarter Balance, send hordes of student data to AIR. Okay. It's well protected. So okay. Yale came up and said, we use a third-party AIR to house and run analytics on the research. AIR is like a world-class organization, and we lean on them heavily already as a district.
And will we use the same data manager that we currently use to send, will they be responsible? How are we getting the data there? Is it
that AIR is a state, the Smarter Balance is a state platform, so I'll let Kate speak to that.
Will our data manager have to come up with a special format to send
they will work
to?
with her.
Okay.
To as they are working with all the districts on how they mine the data and how they collect the information. If you'll recall from the presentation, there was a stipend that came with the research study.
Yep.
That is at the discretion of the school on how to spend. My recommendation to the board would be that it went to that person.
Okay.
For that additional work.
Did you have something you wanted to add, Charles?
No, just that the data, Angela, that Eric's talking about that's going to AIR, that is identifiable, clearly. I mean, this, we would strip out the student's identifiable information. In this case, so it would be a double. Not only is it a well-respected, professional organization, it also, they're not going to get our kids' names.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping that you're comfortable with that and
Yep.
the opt-in.
Yeah.
Gets us.
Right, so it's still another
Right.
clarification for a parent
Yep.
who's not comfortable
Correct.
to also.
Yeah.
And you can keep in mind that the additional layer that Julie described is that students themselves can opt in or opt out. They're not going to be forced to participate in the surveys. They can choose not to take them.
Okay.
So it seems to me that there's a lot of levels of protection in place.
The children can opt out of taking the surveys, but if their parent opted them in, their data would still go to the survey, to the.
Well, if they don't take the survey, there's no data.
No,
If
but
a parent sends a permission slip, their data can be
and
collected.
it's their academic data and their special education.
I'm saying there's
records.
opt-in and opt-out at both the parent level and the student level.
Right.
Yeah. Were there any other questions for Kate or for Charles? And if not, I'm going to ask if someone is comfortable making a motion.
Make a motion. Go ahead, Kim.
I'll make a motion to recommend to the Portland Board of Education the approval of the Yale Child Study Research Study at Portland High School.
Thank you, Kim. Is
I'll
there-
second that.
Seconded by Meg. Is there any further discussion? Nope, hearing none. All in favor? Aye. Any abstentions?
Yep, that's me.
Okay, Angela's abstaining. Motion passes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kate, and thank you for bringing this to us.
Thank you.
All right, we will move on to Board of Ed policy. This is a second reading on policy 5141.5, suicide prevention.
Yeah, we had 2 questions last time. Sarah, do you want to come up and give us one question, if I'm recalling correctly, was about whether we warehouse the results of the assessments we take, and then the second one was whether we provide parents resources to help them support students through traumatic issues.
So to the first question of do we house that risk, so I'll back up. When we're talking about risk assessment, this is a student who might make a statement indicating that they are planning to harm themselves or someone else. When that happens in our schools, our clinicians do what's called a risk assessment. What I spoke about when we first talked about the policy is the main change in this policy is the state is mandating a specific universal screener. And I shared that with you guys what it looks like. It's pretty easy. There's kind of like a flow chart that clinicians follow of like if they say yes to this question, they're this level of risk. If they say no, they're this level of risk. It's in line with what we've already been doing, but it is nice. It has a visual associated with the whole state's using it. So that is the protocol that our clinicians follow if they find that a student is saying, you know, I'm thinking of hurting myself, or I want to die, or I'm thinking about XYZ, self-harm. So we don't have any form associated with that. There's nothing that is filled out by a clinician that is sent home to parents or housed in any specific place. Clinicians take their own clinical notes on what they're doing and that piece, but there's nothing that is housed that is like a form in a student file or anything that goes with it. So that was one of the questions. The second question that was raised was, do we have resources for parents specifically in the context of the lockdown that happened at Portland Middle School? I reached out to the state, and there are 2 things that I'll probably speak about in my board presentation on the 21st, but one is they provided us with a significant amount of resources for parents in preparing for the possibility of something like a lockdown and in the aftermath of a lockdown that we could provide to parents and families. It's something that the state works on with different agencies, because unfortunately this is something that is not infrequent in our state. The other piece is I did talk with the state about a specific violence prevention protocol and training for our staff, not only in regards to students who are making statements about harming themselves, but students who are making statements about harming others, threats toward the school building, things like that. So there is a research-based, completely free training and protocol that the state offers. There's about 45 districts in Connecticut that currently are trained in that protocol. And I spoke with someone from the state today, and I was going to bring it to leadership team literally tomorrow if we wanted to do that. So that would be an example of something that is not suicide specific, but it is a violence prevention program, and that does have a decision tree, a form, something it is kept in our records that we are, addressing those threats. So that would be like a student who's making a statement of, I'm going to bring a weapon to school, something like that. That would then fall under that type of assessment. So I hope that makes sense. It's kind of separate, and it's not exactly in the suicide prevention policy, but it is something I'm looking into just because we do have students who make those kind of statements, and right now we do obviously go through the risk protocol with our clinicians, but it is a research-based additional thing that is the gold standard in Connecticut that many districts are trained on, and it is a team approach. So right now our risk assessment is 1 or 2 clinicians kind of going through that process. This would be a whole multidisciplinary team of when a statement is made that is referencing violence or self-harm. There'd be a whole team approach to assessing the student, follow through, what supports do they need after making the statement, what community supports are available to the family. So it's a little more comprehensive. So that's a long answer. So no, we don't keep forms right now in regards to risk assessments in our district, but I'm looking into that completely free gold standard training for our staff K-12 through the state, because I think it would be a good thing to have so that when statements are made like that are really concerning, we're assessing them in a way that we're doing our full due diligence and no one's doing it alone.
Thank you, Sarah. The only other thing I would just add about this policy specifically is that the update to this policy that was state mandated for us includes the 988 crisis line number. That's what was missing from our current policy piece, and that's what required to be updated.
That and the state-approved assessment.
And the state-approved assessment, which is, I believe, in the regulation.
Correct. Correct, yeah.
But
good
I
point.
can't find it in the regulation, so I'm just gonna ask that before we send it off to CABE, that we make sure that that is noted somewhere in the legal references or in the, at the end of the policy legal references. Just that we need to do that universal screener by itself.
Yeah, the Columbia Protocol
Right.
is the
Yeah.
Right, and I think that needs to be noted.
Sure, we'll update that for sure, in the
So that's,
regulation.
otherwise it can be approved.
Are there any other questions for Sarah or for Charles about this policy? It is the second read, so if anyone's willing to make a motion.
I will make a motion to accept policy 5141.5 and add the protocol, the universal screener, before it's sent to CABE for included in our catalog.
second that.
Seconded by Kim, thank you. Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. I believe the motion passes unanimously. That takes care of old business. Thank you. We're gonna move on to committee reports. Curriculum. Do you wanna give an update?
Curriculum met to review a new textbook for the Spanish department. So that was a great presentation, a lot of information. It will now align with the other textbooks that are currently being used in other languages. So we had a good discussion regarding that.
Yeah, and that will be on our board agenda, the next meeting in January. Thank you. Policy.
Policy, the meeting is canceled, and we will need a third board member, and then we'll resume.
Yes, and the last time we met in December, we were continuing the discussion
Yeah, we
about
did.
the transfer of funds between categories. We were working with Stephanie on that, and may have a recommendation at some point
Yeah,
for the
we
board to
will,
consider.
We'll get there.
And there,
Yeah.
and just clean up what we're sitting on our desks right now.
Yeah.
for sure. Craig is gonna meet on the 15th.
Hold on, we're gonna go in order. I'll
Oops,
get to
one
that.
more. Building-
Person,
sorry.
it's okay. Personnel did meet. We discussed everything you've heard this evening, the para position, the change in sub rates, which we'll discuss in executive session, and the high school self-health section.
And secretary negotiations.
And secretary negotiations are ongoing. That's right.
No meeting for building and grounds, but thank you to Bob and Charles and Stephanie who put together the capital funding requests that came out of that meeting that we had in December.
Correct liaison.
Meeting is gonna happen the 15th of January, and their annual report is up, so I'll make sure we have copies of that for everybody.
Board of Selectmen.
Yeah, there four basic things. They talked a lot about the American Rescue Funds, making sure those got allocated, anything left over by the year end. They also did a bunch of transfers at the end of the year, just like we do. They also created a new committee called the 250 America Committee, which I didn't even realize that in 2026 it's 250 years since the Declaration of Independence. So, as with any committee they form, there is their mission, what their duties are, all that stuff is listed on there. So if you wanted to look at the minutes, you can see that, and they are looking for volunteers.
And and that reminds me, Dave, I gotta get on that, because they're looking to partner with the Board of Ed, the
Yeah.
schools.
They want to
to-
appoint a public schools
Yeah,
representative.
I have to
Yeah.
go add that.
Yeah.
But I'm glad you brought that up, because that slipped
Yeah,
out of
that
my mind,
means
so.
floats and parades and all kinds of.
Lastly, our second to last is our Tim Lavoy was nominated to fill a vacancy, so that was good. And then lastly, Ryan, gave his thanks and his official resignation, and they decided to table voting on a replacement for a selectman until tomorrow night. And in the interim, Mike Hernandez, who is the deputy selectman, is filling in. So tomorrow night we will hopefully decide, or they will decide and vote on our new first selectman through the auction.
Thank you, Dave. Youth Services Advisory.
Courtney, I think, is still on maternity leave, so I don't think there's a meeting until later in February. But I would recommend that she participate in the Wellness Committee, because she would be a good partner for prevention, wellness, and all that.
Sure.
Yeah.
Equity and Inclusion Coalition.
Eric just sent out an email today about January events that you should have in your email that you can take a look at.
And we are scheduled to meet in January, but I haven't connected with Stephen to know if that's still on the calendar.
And Strategic Capital Improvements Committee is on here, it's the newest addition. And, you know, we've had two meetings so far. The first was really just introductory. In the second meeting, which is pretty productive, Charles took us through you know, all the work that's been done thus far, and that was a really important update for some members of the committee who haven't been quite as involved along the way. So I thought that was productive. There was some conversation about decision-making around two sort of priority things as we move forward, and the first was around what to do with the 6th grade, and the second was around whether or not there's interest in consolidating from 3 schools to 2 or maintaining 3 schools. The committee did have a conversation about the 6th grade, and there was a motion that passed unanimously that committee is interested in, as part of the recommendations to the Board of Education and the Board of Selectmen, including in that a move from the 6th grade from Biz to the middle school. So that's kind of about as much as has happened thus far, but there'll be another meeting Thursday.
Where will that be and what time?
Here at 6.
6 p.m.
Yeah. Yeah, and as Charles mentioned, staffing issues seem to be making it challenging to provide a Zoom option, but I think there's interest in offering one if the town can figure out staffing for it. So more to come on that. Audience of citizens. Do we have anyone with us in person who wishes to address the board at this point in time? Or anyone online who wishes to address the board?
No one has responded yet.
Okay. I'll give them a going once, going twice. It's late. We're gonna move on. Here we go. Board of Ed member comments. Can start over here.
I'm
Dave.
good. I'm good.
Sarah.
No comments.
Liam.
Firstly, I'd like to thank Ms. McCormick and Ms. Allen as well for their years of dedicated service. I would like to congratulate Tim on his appointment to the Board of Selectmen. And lastly, I would like to offer my condolences to the Manning family.
Thank you, Liam. And thanks for sticking it out with us. This is a long one.
Yeah.
Angela.
I think I'm good. Thank you.
Sure.
I echo everything Liam said. Well put. Ditto. I have nothing else.
The only thing I really wanted to say was just that in kind of bidding farewell to Tim, and it's too bad he's not here with us tonight, but I was thinking about how long he served on the Board of Education, and I think he's been on the Board of Ed 9 or 10 years. It's a long, that's a long time, and I think as those of us who are up here at this table know, and anyone who's served on a Board of Education, it is a tremendous time commitment. It is a tremendous amount of work and of effort, and it's all volunteer, and oftentimes without a whole lot of thanks. So I really wanted to say thank you to Tim, because I think it takes just a tremendous commitment to public education and to our kiddos and to service to your community to do this for 9 years, 10 years, however long it was. That's a really long time of service. So thank you to Tim. He certainly lives a big hole on the board, and we wish him the best of luck on the Board of Selectmen. And that's all I have to say. So we're going to move into executive session. If someone would make a motion.
I'll make a motion to move into executive session and invite Dr.
Thank you. Do we need to do, I'm sorry, you didn't say for the purposes of, did you just say for the purposes of?
For the purposes of discussing the
Wage adjustment.
Wage adjustment and the administrative memorandum of agreements for additional benefits.
Thank you. And
Sorry.
the motion was made and seconded. Can we just take a vote? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. All right.
9:34.
Good thing we started at